Good morning, Commissioners. This is the April 14th, 2016 public meeting. Chair Srinivasan. Here. Commissioner Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin. Here. Commissioner Chen.
Here.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum. Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Shamir-Barron. Commissioner Voss. Here. You start, right? Start.
We're starting in your
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. Today marks a significant milestone in the Backlog Initiative. We're bringing forward for designation 10 items today, 9 of which are Backlog Initiative properties. The other, the Park Slope Historic District Extension 2, was heard in 2013, and we are pleased to recommend its designation today. One of the backlog items, St. Augustine's Roman Catholic Church and Rectory, is included in the boundaries of that district, so we are recommending removing it from the calendar as an individual landmark as part of that action. All 5 boroughs are represented in the items today, and they include a diverse array of building types, ages, and styles. There are 4 very old houses, architecturally significant buildings from 2 historic cemeteries, an exceptionally fine church complex, and an iconic sign. These items represent nearly 30% of the backlog properties that you recommended for prioritization in February's public meeting, and their designation will significantly advance our goal to address each of the backlog initiative items by the end of the calendar year. And with that, we'll start with Park Slope.
Item number 1, proposed for designation, is LP 2558, the Park Slope Historic District Extension 2. Donald Pressa presenting.
Good morning. The Park Slope Historic District Extension 2, outlined in red on this map, there it is, there, and down here, includes 292 buildings located just below Flatbush Avenue and west of Grand Army Plaza. At the public hearing on October 29th, 2013, 17 people testified in favor of designation, including representatives of the borough president, the Brooklyn Borough President, and State Assembly person. 1 person was opposed. The 5 sections of the Park Slope Historic District Extension 2 are adjacent to the northern part of the Park Slope Historic District. So this is the basic first designated district. There's this long piece here. That was designated by the Landmarks Commission in 1973 and contains 1,948 buildings. The first Park Slope Historic District Extension, which is this section down here to the west, the southern part of the first designated district, took place in 2012 and includes 613 buildings. The most important factors that contributed to the growth of the Park Slope area during the late 19th century were transportation improvements and the development of Prospect Park. Wide-scale development started in the 1860s close to Flatbush Avenue, which is this diagonal street here, and it comes through Grand Army Plaza there, and which Flatbush Avenue, of course, was an early transportation artery through the area. The neighborhood was steadily developed then with masonry row houses. The Park Slope Historic District Extension 2 was largely developed between 1870 and the early 1900s. Like the previously designated Park Slope districts, it contains rows of well-designed masonry houses and distinguished institutional buildings designed by some of Brooklyn's leading architects. This is reflected in the high quality of the district's architecture. The historic district includes a catalog of mid to late 19th century styles, such as Italianate and Gothic Revival, Neo-Grec and Second Empire, Queen Anne, Romanesque, and Renaissance Revival. There are several notable apartment and institutional buildings in the district, including this Queen Anne-style apartment house at 76 to 82 St. Mark's Avenue, designed by the popular Brooklyn architect Montrose Morris, and the Renaissance Revival-style Carlton Club at 85 6th Avenue, as well as the medieval revival-style apartment building at 47 Plaza Street West, one of the few large apartment buildings in the district. And also the Gothic revival-style St. Augustine's Roman Catholic Church at 6th Avenue and Sterling Place. Commissioners, please note that St. Augustine's Church and Rectory were heard individually in 1966 and again in 1980, and have remained on the Commissioner's calendar since then. And as Lisa said, it is part of the Commission's backlog initiative. So today's action to designate the Park Slope Historic District 2 will afford the church and the rectory the protection of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Therefore, the staff recommends removing them from the calendar as individual landmarks, as they will remain within the boundaries of the historic district.
Thank you, Donald. I'm very pleased to bring Park Slope Extension 2 to the Commission, and like other parts of the original historic district and its extension to the south, this area is really characterized by several rows and streets of row houses and brownstones. They're very intact. They line the street consistently, and with the varying architectural details and expression, they really are the predominant defining factor of this neighborhood and blocks. And if you walk through the streets, I think you always feel like, well, I'm in a historic district. It's just very, very evident. So I'm very pleased with our research staff who's pulled this all together. And I'm also happy that this includes St. Augustine's, which is a very handsome anchor on 6th Avenue, and that will also be part of the district. Are there other comments? All right. In that case, we can move to decision. And let me just put that. I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate the Park Slope Historic District Extension 2, Borough of Brooklyn, as a New York Historic District because it contains buildings and other improvements that have a special character and a special historical and aesthetic interest and value, which represents one or more eras in the history of New York City, and which cause this area, by reason of these factors, to constitute a distinct section of the city. Further, this historic district is part of the development, heritage, and culture of the city, state, and nation, all of which is set forth in the designation report for LP 2558, dated April 12, 2016. I further move that the district be designated with the boundaries as set forth in the Commission's designation report and shown on the attached map.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I think this district is approved. And I also make a move that St. Augustine's Roman Catholic Church and Rectory, 49 Sterling Place, Borough of Brooklyn, Tax Block 944, lots 41 and 30, which was heard as a proposed individual landmark on February 8, 1966, and which is now incorporated in the Park Slope Historic District Extension 2, be removed from the Commission's calendar for consideration as an individual landmark.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? This item is removed from the Commission's calendar. I just want to thank everyone who worked very hard from the community. Some of them are here today. And think it's a great thing that this has been approved.
Commissioners, item number 3 is laid over, the Immaculate Conception Church of the Bosom.
Yes, I just want to talk a little bit about that we will be laying over this item for designation, and as the Commission will remember that on February 23rd, the Commission agreed to prioritize the Church of Immaculate Conception in the Mausoleum District in the Bronx for designation by the end of 2016. We also recommended that the designation be limited to the church building itself. We originally scheduled that this item be brought to the Commission today for vote. However, we are aware that the church expressed concerns regarding responsibilities associated with its designation. And more recently, the district has a new council member. So in the spirit of cooperation and to continue our outreach efforts, I believe it's beneficial for us to lay this over to June. Just to note that the agency has decades of experience working with religious institutions, and that the Commission understands that the balance that a church needs to ensure between maintaining the building and also fulfilling its mission is important. And also we recognize that these will not necessarily be mutually exclusive, but we work with churches all the time to allow repairs, replacement, code upgrades, and restoration. So I think it's okay for us to lay this over, and we'll bring it back on June 28th. Are there comments? Okay, so we'll continue.
I'm happy that the staff is working with the community, and we're still moving towards a mutual agreement so we can landmark the church.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
Okay. Item number 4 is LP 2395, 65 Schofield Street, the 65 Schofield Street house. The landmark site is Block 5628, Lot 146. Terry Noonan presenting.
Good morning. My name is Teresa Noonan, and I am here to present for designation the William H. Schofield House. The William H. Schofield House was part of the backlog hearing held on October 8, 2015. 6 people spoke in support at the hearing, and the Commission received several letters in support of designation. The traditional Italianate-style farmhouse was constructed around 1860 as a part of the estate of William Schofield, a member of one of the first families to settle City Island in 1826. The residence is a fine example of Italianate style of architecture that dominated the American house design from 1850 to 1880. The house is located at the corner of Schofield Street and William Avenue in the section of City Island. City Island was first established as an English settlement in 1654 when the English Crown granted Thomas Pell ownership of the island and parts of Westchester County. City Island was privately owned first by the Pell family and then by the Palmer family. It became part of the town of Pelham in Westchester County in 1819 and was then sectioned off into large parcels of land as ownership passed to other individuals. Schofield Street takes its name from the estate of one of the first families to acquire land on City Island after it became part of Westchester County. William Schofield acquired the land in 1826. The resident at 65 Schofield is attributed to his son, William Henry Schofield, who resided there until his death in 1902. The house represents a period of progress on the island when it began to transition into a suburban residential community, concurrently developing from farming to industries unique to the island, such as oyster fishing and shipbuilding, which played an important role during the 19th and 20th centuries. The Italianate style is characterized here by the square plan and tall windows combined with Greek Revival style features such as the flat roof with overhanging cornice and elaborate paired brackets under the eaves that flank the octagonal-shaped windows. The house's most striking feature is the one-story veranda that runs the width of the ground floor main facade and setback addition. Turn posts rise from baluster railings to support the projecting porch roof. Each is flanked by wood jigsaw brackets. Directly above are pairs of smaller brackets ornamented by acorn drop pendants. The house has undergone a recent sensitive restoration by its current owners. The additions they added to the house is subservient in size and harmonious in terms of style and materials. The William H. Schofield House at 65 Schofield Street is a significant and rare surviving transitional Italianate farmhouse on City Island. And for its association with the Schofield family, a prominent City Island family known for their association with the oyster industry.
Thank you, Terry. Are there any questions? All right, are there any comments? Yes.
Very few better than this Italianate building, certainly on City Island and in the city itself. This is a remarkable survivor, and I think we need to designate it.
Thank you. Yes.
I think it's an interesting project for us to designate for a number of reasons. I think that the kind of nexus between cultural significance and aesthetic, architectural significance is important. The kind of embodiment of the family, the family's history on the island in the house, I think is significant. So I think it's another kind of brick in the wall of trying to build up cultural landmarks as well as aesthetic ones. And I also think that it's unusual, at least in my experience, that we're landmarking a single-family house that has undergone a recent renovation and extension. And I think it goes to the point that residential buildings like this can undergo modifications and still retain their historic significance. So I think it's a great project for the commission.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, thank you. And I just want to also thank the owners of this house, because they did work with the commission when they were looking at renovating their building, and it's a very sensitive renovation. Okay. I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate William Schofield House, 65 Schofield Street, Borough of the Bronx, as a New York City landmark because of its special character and special historical and aesthetic interest and value as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in designation report for LP 2395, dated April 12, 2016. I also move that the Borough of the Bronx Tax Map Block 5628, Lot 146 be designated as its landmark site. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So this building is designated.
Item number 5 is LP 1233, Greenwood Cemetery. At Greenwood Cemetery, the landmark site is Brooklyn, Block 902, Lot 1. Mary Ann Hurley presenting.
Good morning. Greenwood Cemetery was proposed for designation at a special backlog hearing held October 8, 2015. At that hearing, there was general support for the designation of selected buildings, but not the entire cemetery site. 2 individuals representing the cemetery spoke against designation. The entire cemetery, all of Lot 1, was heard then, but today we're proposing only selected buildings and features of the lot for designation, specifically the Fort Hamilton Parkway entrance and the cemetery chapel. The Fort Hamilton Parkway entrance is located at the southeastern side of the cemetery along Fort Hamilton Parkway. And that is right here. This is the entire cemetery site, and it's on that far end there. The site includes not only the buildings, but also the brownstone gate posts, iron gates, and low wall and associated fencing. The chapel is located near the main entrance. That's up here, this little dot that you see. And what we're designating consists of the building and the front stairs. Greenwood Cemetery was established in 1838 as one of the country's earliest and largest rural picturesque cemeteries. It was influenced by the English garden movement. The Gothic Revival style was promoted as an integral part of the overall design of rural cemeteries, as seen in its use in the memorials, monuments, and structures. Both the Fort Hamilton Parkway entrance and the chapel continue this Gothic Revival design tradition that began during the cemetery's early development, and particularly evident in the main entrance gate, which is a New York City landmark since 1966, and that is in the center here that you can see that's already designated, but it set the tone. The Fort Hamilton Parkway entrance was designed by Richard Mitchell Upjohn. Upjohn, like his father Richard Upjohn, was well known for his skill adapting the Gothic Revival style to various building types. This rendering by the architect shows the entrance buildings consisting of a large residence seen in the foreground and a visitor's lounge building to the right. As seen in this historic photograph, the entrance is an excellent example of the high Victorian Gothic, popular during the post-Civil War years. Important features include prominent patterned steep roofs with iron cresting, arched window openings, stained glass, and carved and applied ornamentation. Then, as today, the entrance, including the associated gates, provides an elegant entry into the cemetery. The brownstone residence at the entrance features a tall central tower-like section, arched windows, decorative dormers, and front and rear wood porches with scroll sawn ornament. Also shown in the photograph are the inner gates, a gate post, and fencing. The visitor's lounge features decorative carved details in stained glass, and most notably 4 sculptured panels illustrating the 4 Ages by John Moffat. Also shown in the photograph are the outer gates and gate posts. The Greenwood Cemetery Chapel was built in 1913 and designed by the eminent architectural firm of Warren and Wetmore, best known for their Grand Central Terminal. The chapel was constructed on a drained pond bed near the main entrance, that you see on the right.
It looks like the tiara that's put on the Queen Victoria.
As seen in the construction photograph from 1911, the limestone-clad chapel incorporated iron reinforcing bars into the concrete structure to support the central dome. The chapel is an excellent example of a late Gothic-inspired building with Beaux-Arts massing, giving it a pavilion-like presence within the landscape. Its most prominent feature is the cluster of towers with ogee-shaped domes. It is embellished with delicate Gothic Revival carved ornament and stained glass windows with decorative stone tracery. Like the Fort Hamilton Parkway entrance, the chapel retains excellent integrity of materials and design, as shown in the photograph taken shortly after construction on the left, and the chapel as it is today on the right. Both the Fort Hamilton Parkway entrance and the chapel are historically and architecturally significant. They were designed by prominent architects, harmoniously incorporated into the picturesque landscape, and are excellent examples of Greenwood Cemetery's tradition of Gothic revival. As noted at the beginning of this presentation, staff are recommending designating the lot in part consisting of the Fort Hamilton Parkway entrance and the Greenwood Cemetery Chapel with boundaries as shown on the slide.
Thank you, Marianne. Are there any questions? Yes, right.
Who did the ironwork, Marianne? Was it Yellens?
No, I don't know that. I didn't come across that.
Okay. All right.
My question is, how did we determine the boundaries of the landmark site? And the reason I ask is there a concern that someone could buy a mausoleum plot like a foot and a half away and erect a tower, or are there significant landscape features of any kind that kind of make for the understanding of the landmarks that should be considered?
All right, I think that there are two. So just in terms of the chapel itself, it is the footprint of the chapel. And in terms of the gatehouse and the visitors' lounge, the boundaries are actually determined by what you have on site, which there are piers that are historic, as well as a fence, which essentially follows this configuration. So in fact, if you go there, it feels like it's sort of a already determined sort of complex within the larger complex.
And do those lines follow, let's say, the lines of sale of potential lots to other private people? I mean, I'm sure there's some demising map of the cemetery.
Yes, and they do, within this boundary, there aren't burials, and we haven't heard from Greenwood that there would be an expectation, but just outside of those fences, there are. So we did want to avoid any burials within the landmark site.
Right, okay. So theoretically, someone, they could sell a lot and put up a mausoleum right next to it?
Adjacent, outside of the landmark site, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any comments? Yes.
I just wanted to comment on this very important designation. It was suggested earlier by many people that the entire cemetery should be designated. It's hard to overvalue or overestimate the importance of this cemetery in American history, not the least of which Frederick Olmsted, a resident of Staten Island at that point, used to enjoy Sunday afternoons frolicking, the way many others did, among the grave sites of Greenwood. And he was so inspired by that he thought, it might work without grave sites. And the whole of Central Park and all the rest of the American park system that Olmsted created was really based on his understanding of this green space. But it made no sense, I think, to landmark the whole site. It was impractical. It might mean that every burial, every new mausoleum, every marker might come before this commission, and I think it was simply impractical. But what is being landmarked, I think, is of great significance and certainly worthy of landmarking. But I also want to point out that this extraordinary cemetery and its management over many, 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 many years has taken preservation very seriously, and these buildings have been maintained as if they're landmarks. So we're just codifying what in effect has already happened. And I'll finalize my comments by saying I think other cemeteries in our city have extraordinary buildings, and I hope that we start to look at some of those, again, not the whole cemetery, but individual buildings as well. But this is a really deserving and important designation, I think.
Yes, Diana?
Yeah, I just want to echo briefly Fred's comments and say that, I really appreciate the relationship we've had with Greenwood in terms of preservation, and not only these buildings, which are in wonderful shape and just, I think, excellent candidates, but also the greenhouse and the work that we did with them prior to restore and preserve that. So I just want to thank them for their efforts.
Yes, Michael.
I agree. I think these are amazing, remarkable buildings. I love that Warren Wetmore building. It's so weird, such a weird mashup of styles. It's just, I'm not aware of precedents for it. There may be, but it's just a really intense and beautiful building. But it's great. But I think that in the future, I certainly would support this designation. I think that I would ask the staff to look at situations like this, which are pretty unusual, where you don't really have like a tax lot to default to, but to look at, especially for buildings that are created in the round and that are meant to be experienced as single objects, that there be some fringe that would consider their siting and not to impinge on the operations of the cemetery in any way, but to, let's face it, no one's going to want to have their tombstone, a foot and a half away from the foundation wall of the building. But and it's what you're saying, Fred, was completely true. This place is maintained as if it has been a landmark since day one. But I think it's as policy, I think it would be wise for us to consider, if possible, having some fringe around the buildings.
Okay, thank you, and I just want to also add to the commissioners who have spoken today that I think the chapel and the gatehouse and the Visitors Lounge. They're exceptional buildings, they're architectural gems, very prominent against a very beautiful bucolic setting, and along with the gate that we already designated, I think this sort of completes the complex in terms of the buildings that you really can experience from the public realm, that is from the streets and not necessarily just within the complex itself. So I'm very happy that we're moving ahead with this designation. So with that, I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate the Fort Hamilton Parkway entrance and the Greenwood Cemetery Chapel, Greenwood Cemetery, 525th Street, Borough of Brooklyn, as a New York City landmark because of their special character and special historical and aesthetic interest and value, as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in the designation report for LP 1233, dated April 12, 2016. I also move that the Borough of Brooklyn tax map Block 902, Lot 1, in part consisting of A, the entire Greenwood Cemetery Chapel building and steps, and the land upon which these improvements are sited and located adjacent to the cemetery's landscape avenue, and B, the Fort Hamilton Parkway entrance, aka Eastern entrance, consisting of the area bounded by a line beginning at the westernmost outer gate post on Fort Hamilton Parkway, and including such gate following the northwestern edge of the iron fence as it extends from the gate post to the residence west facade, northerly along the residence west facade, and easterly along the residence north facade, following the western edge of the iron fence and the north facade of the residence to the westernmost inner gate post, and including such gate post following a line extending easterly along the northern edge of the inner gates to the easternmost inner gate post, and including such gate post along with the northern edge of the iron fence with the easternmost inner gate post is going on forever, and including such gate post to the north facade of the Visitors Lounge, easterly along the Visitors Lounge north facade, and southerly along the Visitors Lounge east facade, following the eastern edge of the iron fence from the east facade of the Visitors Lounge along the easternmost edge of the iron fence southerly to the easternmost outer gate post on North Hamilton Parkway, and including such gate post, and then southwest along the southern edge of the low wall and outer gate posts and gates to the point of beginning designated as the landmark site. I further move that the rest of the calendar lot be removed from the Commission's calendar. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Greenwood Cemetery buildings are designated.
Item number 6 is LP. Item number 6, LP 1130, 27 Gravesend Neck Road, Lady Moody-Van Sicklen House, which is how it was heard. Landmark site is Brooklyn, Block 7123, Lot 64, Gail Harris presenting.
The backlog hearing took place on October 8, 2015. The owner did not testify at the hearing, but subsequently sent a letter expressing opposition to the designation. At the hearing, there were 8 speakers in support of the designation. The Commission has received many written submissions in support of designation, only the owner's letter in opposition. Located at the northwest quadrant of the historic town of Gravesend, Brooklyn, and the Van Sicklen House is among the oldest surviving Dutch-American houses in Brooklyn, and is the only known stone extant 18th century house, largely of stone construction in the borough. The house is linked to the earliest colonial history of Brooklyn in that it occupies part of the house lot of Lady Deborah Moody, who founded Gravesend in the 1640s. That said, this appears to be one of the earliest surviving houses in Brooklyn and New York City. In 1702, farmer and property owner Fernandez Van Sicklen Jr. acquired this land. Members of the Van Sicklen family were probably responsible for constructing the house, which was built in sections, beginning in the early 18th century, or perhaps earlier, and for expanding it in the mid-18th century. During the 18th century, the Van Sicklens, who occupied the house, were farmers and prominent members of the Gravesend community, serving in a variety of municipal and institutional posts. The oldest portion of the house, the stone portion, went to this partition, this wall, which would have been the rear wall. And there was a partition wall that went along here, so that it was a hall chamber plan. The rear sections were added in the around 1750, 1760. The kitchen wing shown here was probably 19th century, replacing an earlier kitchen wing, 18th century kitchen wing. In the mid-18th century, when the rear additions were added, the roof was recentered with a gently sloping pitch and wide overhanging spring eaves, creating a profile typical for mid to late 18th century Dutch American houses in Staten Island and Brooklyn. Other 18th century features that make this an excellent example of the Brooklyn and Staten Island Dutch American house type include its low proportions, rectangular plan, and the location of the door and window openings on the western half of the facade and gabled end walls. The house was occupied by the Van Sicklens and later by the family of Cornelia Van Sicklen Hicks and her husband Thomas Hicks until the early 1900s. In 1904, the house was acquired by a realtor, William E. Platt, who with his wife Isabel made extensive alterations, including the addition of dormer windows, incorporating decorative elements inspired by the colonial revival style and the prevalent arts and crafts aesthetic. The Platts were responsible for popularizing the long-standing idea that this had been the ancient home of Lady Deborah Moody. The owner, who opposes designation, submitted a letter dated April 6, 2016, outlining alterations to the building and questioning whether it merits designation. Staff research concluded that despite the alterations made in the early 1900s, the house largely retains its 18th century massing, form, proportions, and a large degree of its original window openings, and a number of significant architectural elements, such as its spring eaves. Additionally, its subsequent alterations are consistent with the tendency of small historic structures to be modified and enlarged over time, with some changes being significant in their own right by reflecting changes in aesthetics over time. The house remains on its original site and is located across the street from the designated Gravesend Van Sicklen Cemetery. The structure is one of the few remaining buildings that represent the early history of Gravesend, a significant New York colonial community.
Thank you, Gail. Are there any questions? Any comments? Yes, Michael.
I might get on the New World Dutch hobby horse for a second. It's extremely unfortunate that the owner is in opposition, and for the reasons given, because I think if we and some of the staff could sit down with them, we could make them understand the importance of a building like this. I mean, not only the early New World Dutch architecture, but the fact that what they have is a particularly unique building in that it begins with not rubble stone, but dress stone, which means they were serious about building this construct. And that's the typology that's covered in Reynolds' book, on the book on Dutch vernacular architecture by Stevens, by all the historians who talk about New World Dutch architecture. What they talk about is story-and-a-half stone buildings with wooden second stories. It's all across the map. And so the discussion that there have been changes to the building really sort of fall to the side when you think of a building like the building Stillwell Perrine House in Staten Island, which also had a complete change in the roof slopes. And it's very typical for these things to start off in that 38 by 18 mass. That's the fundamental Dutch mass that came from who knows where in the Walloon areas of Europe, but it makes its way here. And the next thing that happens is there's an entire length of the building that's an addition on the back. It's textbook stuff. And so what this building does, yes, it's been altered, but it gives us a palimpsest of this kind of not only architectural information, but social information. They started off as farmers. How has this thing changed over time? And I think it worries me that non-designation could eventually lead to the loss of this resource. And, I'm one of those folks who feels very strongly that we have been given this patrimony, and it is our responsibility to pass it on to the next generations. And so if we don't do that, we are lacking. And I think this building is very worthy of designation.
Thank you. Are there other comments? All right. Now move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate Van Sicklen House, 27 Gravesend Neck Road, Borough of Brooklyn, as a New York City landmark because of its special character and special historical and aesthetic interest and value as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in designation report for LP 1130, dated April 12, 2016. I also move that the Borough of Brooklyn tax map block 7123, lot 64 be designated as its landmark site. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
On behalf of the commission, I'd like to thank three people. Joseph Dinner, who's here and who shared with us his amazing collection of images of Old Gravesend, and then two genealogists, Richard McCool and Harry Macy, who's the former editor of the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society Journal. Thank you.
Thank you, Gil.
Item number 7, LP 1208, at Richmond Road and Altamont Street is the Vanderbilt Mausoleum and Cemetery. Landmark site is Staten Island, Block 934, Lot 250. Michael Karatzis presenting.
Commissioners, the Vanderbilt Mausoleum was previously heard at the special backlog hearing on October 22, 2015. At that hearing, 6 people, including a representative of the Vanderbilt Cemetery Association, spoke in support of designation, and there were no speakers in opposition to designation. At the previous hearings, all of Lot 250 was heard, but today we are proposing only selected features of the lot for designation, which will be described in the following presentation. The mausoleum was previously heard as Vanderbilt Mausoleum and Cemetery, Moravian Cemetery, Richmond Road, and Altamont Street. The Vanderbilt Mausoleum is an extraordinary monument to America's Gilded Age. Built by the country's wealthiest family of the time and combining the talents of 2 of America's greatest designers, Richard Morris Hunt and Frederick Law Olmsted, it was hailed as the most magnificent tomb of any private individual and the most costly museum in America following its 1886 completion. It was planned by William H. Vanderbilt, the son of Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt, the Staten Island native who amassed America's largest fortune through his steamboat and railroad lines which played a major role in the 19th century development of New York City and state. When he died in 1885, William H. Vanderbilt was the richest person in American history. Dramatically sited near the apex of Tote Hill, the mausoleum is an imposing structure of gray Quincy granite. Hunt's design is primarily Romanesque Revival in style, featuring 3 arched doorways, keyhole openings, and luxurious but restrained carved tympana and diaper work. 2 unusual lanterns with attenuated domes with fish-scale roofing crown the structure. Its ornate bronze gates, designed by Hunt, were fabricated by workers imported from leading Parisian bronze foundries and were among the largest such castings made in America up to that time. The country's most celebrated landscape architect, Frederick Law Olmsted, designed the mausoleum grounds, although most of the original Olmsted plantings have been lost. We are recommending for designation 4 landscape features: the broad terrace in front of the mausoleum, which was designed by Hunt and Olmsted, the hillock enclosing the mausoleum, which originally covered its roof, the entrance arch and gates, and the adjoining stone retaining walls at the plot's entrance, and the winding pathway connecting the entrance arch with the terrace. Interment within the mausoleum was reserved to those with a Vanderbilt name, including sons, their wives, and unmarried daughters. It houses the remains of all 4 of William H. and Maria Vanderbilt's sons and 3 of their wives, who today are most widely known for their spectacular homes designed by outstanding American architects. Like these houses, the Vanderbilt Mausoleum is an exceptional remnant of the Gilded Age, constructed by Vanderbilt family members at the height of their wealth, power, and prominence, when they were commissioning some of America's finest and most enduring works of architecture.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any questions? Some comments? Yes, John.
In Staten Island, which is generally the land of well-kept secrets, some of which we'll talk about, some of which we won't, the existence and the relationship of the Vanderbilt family, our most famous alums, is more or less forgotten. And the existence of this mausoleum and its site as well could have been forgotten. What you see in this presentation doesn't really do justice to what the site looks like in real life. I've toured it a number of times with Alfred Vanderbilt. And you may wonder why, when you look at the drawing of what the potential landmark site is, and this sort of winding road, and why that is the choice. And it really does make sense, to echo Fred's comments from earlier. I actually have frolicked around this gravesite, although some would say I never frolic anywhere. The impression you get when you walk from that gate up that path to the mausoleum is one of sort of rising, imposing structure, and you tend to your eye reaches up to it as you're walking up this path. The actual mausoleum, and again on the pictures you don't really get the clear impression of it. It sits on the crest of a hill that overlooks New York Harbor from somewhat of a distance, and it's actually embedded, and I've always wanted to use this word in a sentence, it's embedded in a hillock. And I may very well be the first Staten Islander to ever use that word, and I may very well be the last as well. So, but it's embedded in this hillock, and it's got this wonderful plaza and terrace, as they refer to it, sitting in front of it. It's a remarkably peaceful place, and it's a dramatic statement of both 19th century life and 19th century death. It's incredibly impressive to see. I wanted to actually express personal gratitude to Alfred Vanderbilt, who is the family's leader on all things mausoleum. He has worked with an organization, the Staten Island Historical Society, which is an organization I was involved with for a long time in helping to maintain this thing, and regardless of it being a landmark, he and his family have done wonderful things to make sure this is kept the way it ought to be. For once, I think after we act in the next minute or so, when tourists and Staten Island residents alike see this structure and comment, of course, this must be a landmark, I can respond happily that yes, it most certainly is.
Thank you, John. Are there other comments? But I just want to echo what John said. It really is within a breathtaking setting and a hidden gem in Staten Island. And by masters of design, both Richard Morris Hunt and Olmsted, the Mausoleum is an architectural tribute to its time and to a very prominent family, which is now synonymous with New York City. I want to thank the Vanderbilts for their support. They've been just terrific during this entire process, and I understand that Albert is here today, and Alfred is here today, and I want to thank him personally. And just again, this whole process of the backlog has really allowed us to find again these gems that were really put aside for a very, very long time. So it's been really sort of this opportunity for the Commission to continue its mandate to protect the best of our history. So with that, I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate Vanderbilt Mausoleum, Richmond Road, and Altamont Street, Borough of Staten Island, as New York City landmark because of its special character and special historical and aesthetic interest and value as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in the designation report for LP 2008, dated April 12, 2016. I also move that the Borough of Staten Island, tax map block 934, lot 250, in part consisting of the entire mausoleum, its steps and retaining walls, the hillock enclosing the mausoleum, the terrace in front of the mausoleum's main facade, and the base and walls of the terrace, the pathway leading from the terrace northeasterly, southeasterly, southwesterly, southeasterly, beneath the arch near the southernmost entrance to the lot boundary, the entrance arch and gates, and the adjoining stone retaining walls extending from the south face and sides of the arch, northeasterly and southeasterly to the north and south lot lines, the stone retaining walls extending from the north face of the arch along both sides of the portion of the pathway, the land beneath the opening in the entrance arch and the land beneath these improvements are designated as a landmark site. Finally, I move the remainder of lot 250 be decalendared.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The Mausoleum, the Vanderbilt Mausoleum is designated. And once again, thank you to the Vanderbilt family.
Item number 8, LP 1653 at 4600 5th Street, the Pepsi Cola sign, Borough of Queens, Block 21, Lot 1 in part. Corinne Engelbert presenting.
One of the best-known features of the New York City waterfront, the Pepsi Cola sign has become an iconic piece of the urban landscape, representing commercial advertising and American industry. On October 8, 2015, the Pepsi Cola sign was heard as part of the Landmark Preservation Commission's backlog initiative. At the hearing, 10 people spoke in support of designation and 2 people spoke in opposition. Many of the speakers referred to the sign as an all but official city landmark, and the sign was described as the most identifiable icon of the Queens waterfront. The Pepsi Cola sign was constructed in 1940 and erected on the roof of the Pepsi Cola bottling facility in Long Island City. Contemporary accounts attribute the sign to the General Outdoor Advertising Company, one of the largest advertising companies of its time. At the time of its construction, the Pepsi Cola sign was the longest electric sign in New York State. Situated on the edge of the East River, the sign was clearly visible from Manhattan's east side and the recently completed FDR. The sign's design closely reflects the company's 1939 trademark logo, with red neon tubing incorporated around the edges of the letters. The 50-foot painted Pepsi-Cola bottle was probably replaced in the 1970s with an updated bottle featuring the company's contemporary design. In 1993, the 53-year-old sign was rebuilt due to significant deterioration. Artcraft Strauss Sign Corporation, a company that produced some of the most memorable Times Square spectaculars of the 20th century, oversaw the work, and the sign was restored in a manner that was in keeping with the design, colors, and details of the original sign. In 2003, Pepsi sold their facility to the Queens West Development Corporation. The Pepsi-Cola bottling facility was demolished and the sign was temporarily relocated. Today, the sign stands within feet of its original location inside Gantry Plaza State Park on a newly configured lot. The Pepsi-Cola sign remains one of the most prominent features of the New York waterfront and serves as a reminder of Long Island City's industrial past.
Thank you, Corinne. Are there any questions? All right, comments? Yes, Diana.
Well, this is, as has been noted, obviously, it's one of the most notable icons in Queens, and although it enjoys many protections, it is really most appropriate that it also becomes a New York City landmark, which will celebrate its presence as an important piece not only of New York City, but national, corporate, and individual history. So I think it's one of these things that, as we were saying before, everyone already thinks is a landmark.
Right. Thank you. Yes.
Point out one more thing. I expressed this concern at the hearings in the fall. My understanding is that legally the signage itself, the wording, can't be protected, but that it is through easements. So I think we're not in danger of losing it, but our designation itself doesn't protect those words up there. Presumably something else could be put there, but I think through easements it can't.
Right, and I think the reason why we're actually moving ahead with designation is because of this unusual history about the sign, including its easements, that allow us to continue to protect it along with other instruments. And I just want to, again, say and agree with Diana. I'm just thrilled that we're moving ahead with this designation. It is probably one of the most universally loved and recognized signs, and it represents many things. It represents Queens, industry, Long Island City, waterfront, signage, graphics, design, sugary drinks, and even parks and recreation where it sits very prominently today. So, but again, I think by designating it, we're able to do the research and tell a very specific story about this industry in Long Island City.
I just want to say that I agree with almost everything that's been said. I just want to add a minor point. Your point about sugary. This also reflects about part of the American culture and the culture as a whole. Because I firmly believe in years to come, very few people will drink sugary drinks anymore if you know what sugar does to a cancer tumor. So in years to come, you may come to appreciate what this is a reminder of.
Okay. And with that, I move that... That's a down. I guess I shouldn't have brought that up. Anyway, I move that the landmarks preservation...
Yes. I think there's going to be a Pall Mall sign that we're going to bring next.
I did have...
Yes, Kim.
I agree that the sign should be landmark, because it's one of my favorite signs, up there with the Colgate sign that's on the, over in Jersey City, that's so iconic. And I'm only upset that the Coca-Cola plant in the Bronx doesn't have a sign on the waterfront. And I'm a Coca-Cola collector, not a Pepsi collector. But one day I hope they get a sign and we can landmark it.
Okay.
We can save the swing line sign in time, that was gone.
Okay, so with that, I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate Pepsi-Cola sign 409 through 47th Street, Long Island 47th Road, Long Island City, Borough of Queens, as a New York City landmark because of its special character and special historical and aesthetic interest and value, as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in the designation report by LP 1653, dated April 12, 2016. I also move that the Borough of Queens tax map, Block 21, Lot 120, be designated as its landmark site. Finally, I move that the tax map, Block 21, Lot 1, be removed from the calendar.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The Pepsi site has been designated.
Item number 9, LP 2341, 39-26, 213th Street, the J. William Ahles House. Landmark site is Borough of Queens, Block 6236, Lot 18. Gail Harris presenting.
The backlog hearing on this item was held on October 8, 2015. The owner's representative spoke in opposition to the designation. There were 8 speakers in support of the designation. The commission has received several written submissions in support of designation, as well as submissions in opposition from the owner. The owner, who opposes designation, submitted materials outlining alterations to the building and questioning whether it merits designation. Research staff undertook an extensive study of their submission and ultimately concluded that many of the alterations date to architect Louis Welch's 1924 redesign of the house and are significant in their own right. This impressive Second Empire-style residence, updated in 1924 with colonial revival-style alterations, is a rare reminder of 19th century Bayside, when it was a village of suburban villas and substantial farmhouses. Now located on 213th Street in Bayside, the Ahles House was built only a few years after railroad service reached Bayside in 1866 and residential subdivisions began to replace farms. It is the only remaining example of the substantial Second Empire buildings erected in Bayside during the 1870s and 80s. It retains the cubic form and dormered mansard roof typical of the Second Empire style, as well as details such as the molded cornice and hexagonal slate shingles. Very few 19th century houses survive in the Borough of Queens, making the Ahles House a rare example of this period. This house was constructed around 1873 by farmer Robert M. Bell for his daughter Lydia, usually known as Lily, and her husband John William Ahles, a prominent grain merchant and officer of the New York Produce Exchange. It is located on a portion of a farm that had descended in the Lawrence family from the 17th century and was purchased by Robert Bell in 1834, a few years after his marriage to Catherine Lawrence. It remained in the ownership of the Ahles family until the 1940s. The house was moved from its original site to its present location in 1924 to allow Christie Street, now 213th Street, to be cut through to 41st Avenue. It was then the architect Louis E. Welch, a prominent exponent of the colonial revival style who specialized in the revitalization of Victorian houses, simplified the building's facade by removing the original wraparound porches, bay window, scroll brackets, replaced the original clapboards with stucco, and installed new panel doors and multi-pane windows, and introduced such features as a sleeping porch that were more in keeping with the arts and crafts infused colonial revival aesthetic of the 1920s. The overall effect of Welsh's alterations was to create a building that still retained the box-like cubic massing, mansard roof, and cornice of its Second Empire origins, and at the same time was a fine example of the colonial revival arts and crafts inspired 1920s design. The relocation and alteration of the Ahles House are significant in their own right because they reflect the historical context of the transformation of Bayside from a rural community to a community suburb in the early 20th century. Today, this house is one of the oldest surviving in Bayside and is a significant reminder of the neighborhood's past.
Thank you. Gail, are there any questions? All right, comments? Okay, I think, yes, Dana.
Well, obviously, the owner had concerns because of the changes that have been made to the house, but as the staff has indicated, even those have a worth, and we often do look at changes to historic buildings and decide that those changes in themselves have some merit to be preserved. But I think looking at this is the fact that in Queens we have very few 19th century buildings at all. And this is one of the oldest surviving houses in Bayside, and the only remaining example of the Second Empire, substantial, I guess, in the borough, really. It really merits the preservation because of that history, I think, and that it does retain some of those original features and has developed, it's part of the history of the development of the borough and of Bayside specifically.
Thank you. Are there other comments? Okay, with that, I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate John William and Lydia and Belle Ahles House, 39-26 213th Street, Borough of Queens, as a New York City landmark because of its special character and its special historical and aesthetic interest and value as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, state, and nation, and set forth in the designation report LP 2341, dated April 12, 2016. I also move that the Borough of Queens tax map block 6236, lot 18, be designated as a landmark site. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The Ahles House is designated.
Item number 10, LP 2344 at 57 Sullivan Street, the 57 Sullivan Street House. The landmark site is Manhattan, Block 489, Lot 2, Gail Harris presenting.
The backlog hearing on this item was held on November 5, 2016. The owner spoke in opposition to the designation. There were 5 speakers in support of the designation. The commission has received many written submissions in support of the designation. There were no additional written submissions in opposition. Located in the portion of the South Village just north of Canal Street, developed in the 1810s and 1820s. This building was constructed in 1816-1817 as a speculative development property by Carter Frederick Yeomans. A 3-bay wood-framed row house, it is a fine example of the federal style, characterized by its brick-clad front laid in Flemish bond, incised paneled stone lintels, incised entry arch with the keystone in impost blocks, and low stoop. The house was originally 2 stories high, undoubtedly capped by a gabled attic with dormers, and had a rear 2-story kitchenette. In 1817, it was purchased by Mason David Bogert, who occupied the house with his family until 1829. In 1841, it was acquired by Thomas Bray, an Irish immigrant gardener. Bray had the house extended at the rear and raised to 3 full stories with brick cladding laid in Flemish bond, similar lintels, and a wooden cornice. The paneled window lintels at the first and second story are thought to be among the earliest surviving examples in Manhattan. The arched first-story entrance surround with incised panel decorations, imposts, and keystones is also very early and rare. During Bray's ownership, the house was subdivided into apartments, which were occupied by members of the Bray family and tenants, primarily tradesmen and craftsmen. By 1875, the basement had been converted to commercial use and was occupied by the Knickerbocker, a bar with an African-American proprietor and a multiracial clientele. The house remained in the ownership of the Bray and Hannafy families until 1924, when it was acquired by Anthony and Louisa Emanuele. Throughout the 20th century, most of the occupants were Italian immigrant working-class families. A post-1995 restoration of the house included new entry doors at the basement and first story, new windows, and ironwork. Today, the 57 Sullivan Street house survives as a fine example of the federal style of architecture and a tangible reminder of the rich multicultural heritage of the South Village.
Thank you, Gail. Do you have questions or comments? Yes.
I would second the remarks about the importance of even the windows here. I've been by this house a few times. That stone is Newark sandstone. We unfortunately in New York City are cursed with some of the worst building stone in America. Oh God, it's just horrible stuff. But the first stuff we were getting was from Newark, New Jersey, and all of those quarries, of course, are covered over with apartment buildings now. The second phase was dragging it down from Portland, Connecticut. So we're blessed in this particular building with having not only Newark sandstone, but in perfectly good condition, which is relatively unusual. So even that little aspect of it makes it a more special building.
Thank you. Are there other comments? Right, with that, I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate 57 Sullivan Street House, 57 Sullivan Street, Borough of Manhattan, as a New York City landmark because of its special character and special historical and aesthetic interest and value, as part of the development, heritage, cultural characteristic of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in the designation report, LP 2344, dated April 12, 2016. I also move that the Borough of Manhattan tax map block 489, Lot 2, be designated as a landmark site.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That Sullivan House is designated.
Item number 11 is LP 2281, 227 West 99th Street, St. Michael's Episcopal Church, Parish House and Rectory. The landmark site is Manhattan Block 1871, lots 24 and 29, Mary Ann Percival presenting.
St. Michael's Episcopal Church, Parish House and Rectory was heard as part of the Backlog Initiative on November the 12th, 2015. The owner spoke in opposition to designation of the entire complex, but supported designation of the church. 9 people spoke in favor of designating the entire complex. And in addition, the Commission received many written comments in support of designation. Located at the northwest corner of West 99th Street and Amsterdam Avenue, St. Michael's was organized by wealthy parishioners of Trinity Church to provide a house of worship for those who had built summer houses in the Bloomingdale section of Manhattan. Incorporated in 1807, the first St. Michael's Church was built on the site and opened for services the same year. Under the leadership of a single family of rectors from 1820 to 1919, St. Michael's not only grew with the Upper West Side, but was responsible for establishing schools, charitable organizations, and new parishes. By the end of the 19th century, as improved transportation led to increased development and population growth in the Upper West Side, it was determined that a larger church was needed. The third and present St. Michael's Church, followed by the Parish House and the Rectory, were designed by Robert W. Gibson and F. Carls Mary and constructed between 1890 and 1913. The architects incorporated a number of stylistic motifs in the basically Romanesque Revival-style design to create a singularly eclectic composition sited around this courtyard. The complex massing of the rough-faced limestone church, 1890 to 91, by Robert W. Gibson, incorporates a long nave with apsidal chancel, unevenly sized transepts, cloistered arcade, tall clerestory, steeply pitched tile roof, and most notably, a tall campanile based on Italian early Christian precedents. The rough-faced limestone and tan brick Parish House, 1896 to 97, originally by F. Carls Mary and then completed in 1901 by Gibson after Mary's death, employs both bold Romanesque Revival-style forms that are tempered by the asymmetrical massing reminiscent of a mid-19th century picturesque villa, and by Palladian windows. The rough-faced limestone Rectory, 1912-13 by Gibson, while more austere, is similar in style and serves as an integral part of the complex. All three buildings are remarkably intact and remain a significant presence in the Upper West Side.
Thank you, Marianne. Are there questions? Any comments? All right, yes, Michael.
I just think it's a wonderful campus, and as a kind of a style of church architecture that was created when the city was quite well under development, I think it's not only the individual buildings, but the space and the kind of the spatial implications of the ensemble that's important here.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that often we see that the church and the later buildings are really don't have the integration with these two, and these are such lovely buildings in themselves that they really, I think, need to be included in this case.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, so with that, I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate St. Michael's Episcopal Church, Parish House and Rectory, 201 West 99th Street, aka 800-812 Amsterdam Avenue, 225 West 99th Street, and 227 West 99th Street, Borough of Manhattan, as a New York City landmark because of its special character and special historical and aesthetic interest and value as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in the designation report for LP 1136 and LP 2281, dated April 12, 2016. I also move that the Borough of Manhattan tax map block 1871, lots 24 and 29 be designated as its landmark site. Second, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, St. Michael's Episcopal Church and Parish House and Rectory are designated. I just want to say that a couple of things. One is that I want to thank our research staff, Lisa, Mary Beth, and the entire team who's here today for working extremely hard over the last several months to pull this all together. I think this meeting and moving forward with the first set of items from the backlog shows our commitment to do this initiative in an efficient manner and complete this backlog initiative by the end of this year. I also want to let the commissioners know that on June 28th, we will be bringing the next set of buildings and properties to the commission for designation, and that will also include the Church of Immaculate Conception, which we laid over today. So thank you again, and they deserve an applause, I think.
Okay, Commissioners, this is the first item on the Preservation Department agenda. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn. This is docket number 18-1088, 72 Middagh Street, located within the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, a stick-frame Federal-style row house built prior to 1900. The application is to amend certificate of appropriateness 162974 to modify the approved rear yard addition.
Good morning, Commissioners, Director and Preservation staff. The project before you is 72 Middagh Street, located in the south side of Meadow Street between Henry and Hicks Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. This application is to amend the certificate of appropriateness issued in November 2014. At that time, the Commission approved alterations of the primary facade, demolition of a rear yard addition and a detached garage, excavation of portions of the rear yard, and construction of a new 3-story partial width rear yard addition. The application is to extend the approved 3-story rear yard addition to incorporate an elevator. The architect is here to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
So the building is extending further. So we approved this in November of 2015, and now they're extending the rear by
approximately 6 feet.
6 feet, and that is to accommodate the elevator?
Correct. So this is the existing condition of the rear. What you see on top is the
proposed.
That's the proposed, and what is below is the actual approved. So what they're doing is they're extending it out approximately 6 more feet to accommodate an elevator at the central of the building.
Okay. All right, do we have any questions for the architect? Yeah, yes.
It looks as if in the rear yard there's something that's bigger than it was.
What was approved right here? This was a greenhouse that was made shorter.
Oh, sorry, shorter.
Yes.
Yep, it was made shorter.
I got them reversed, sorry.
Right, the proposed is actually on top, and
Correct.
the previously approved is below. All right, are there any concerns? Okay, so then we can proceed to read into the record. No, we're 6.
Thanks for counting.
And now we're 7. So do you want to do that? Okay, wait, I'll find it. It's in preservation. Okay.
On the matter of 72 Middagh Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, the application is to amend a certificate of appropriateness 16-2974 to modify the approved rear yard addition. I recommend approval, noting that the proposed enlargement of the rear yard addition extended horizontally to incorporate an elevator will not extend to the rear lot line or diminish the central green space. That the proposed enlargement of the rear yard addition will only be visible from the public thoroughfare at an extreme of oblique angle through a narrow gap between the subject building and an adjacent building. That the proposed enlargement of the rear yard addition will match the height of the previously approved design and therefore will maintain a similar overall massing, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building and the Brooklyn Heights Historic District.
Second. All in favor? Any opposed? This application is approved.
Okay, Commissioners, the second item on the Preservation Department agenda is an application for a certificate of appropriateness to the Borough of Brooklyn, docket number 173830. This is 69A 7th Avenue, located within the Park Slope Historic District. This is a neo-Gothic style row house designed by William Flanagan and built in 1880 and subsequently altered with a two-story commercial addition. The application is to construct a rear yard addition, and this was first presented on the February 16th, 2016 agenda.
Good morning, Commissioners. Catherine Redd, Preservation Department staff. You saw this proposal for a rear yard addition, one story, at 69A 7th Avenue in Park Slope Historic District, located right here. You asked the applicant to study the conditions in the surrounding blocks, these commercialized altered row houses, et cetera, and you asked the applicant to consider the impact of the addition within the block. They have done that and have come up with some modified presentation materials, including a study of the block below, excuse me, can't see. Okay, yes. The study of the block above, pardon me, with a commercial building here, and a study of blocks adjacent. Excuse me, across the street, and what is this? Is this just a blow-up? Okay, sorry, across the street. So you can see that. And then we have Union to Berkeley, the building being here, the district starting in about this location in the 7th Avenue block, but you can see this larger commercial structure on the 7th Avenue side of the block, which is what the applicant wanted to point out. So then we have additional the photographs that we saw last time, showing the non-visibility of the proposed addition from various points. Then we have a photograph of the rear of the lot, reminding you that 191 Berkeley Place is perpendicular to the lot on the end of the block with a deck extension behind it. Here is that, again, here's the site, and the applicant has made some changes, which I'm going to flip forward for a second to show you this. Okay, the previous rear addition was 9'6" approximately, floor to ceiling height, and the applicant has lowered that by 1 foot, and the applicant has also replaced a solid brick parapet wall with a transparent iron railing. So these studies that I flipped by before, are showing the altered view within the block. With trees outlined, here's the deck and Berkeley Place beside, here's the new railing versus the parapet wall, etc. Any questions? Is that clear? Okay.
Yes. Are there any questions? All right. Thank you, Catherine. Are there any comments? Well, I think what's telling is that if you look at page 17 of 30, that's where you sort of really can understand what the effect would be. I think some of the commissioners last time had some concerns about how this rear yard extrusion would affect the donut, but I think over here you can see that essentially sort of lines up with the adjacent home and the deck that they have as well. And they've lowered the height and put a much more sort of transparent railing, a much more porous railing, which again I think reduces the effect of the bulk. So any concerns? No. Okay. Okay. John?
In the matter of docket number 17-3830, 69A 7th Avenue in the Park Slope Historic District, application is to construct a rear addition. I note the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Park Slope Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the construction of the proposed rear addition will not eliminate significant architectural features from the building or road, that the work will not be visible from a public thoroughfare, that the one-story height, full lot width, and full lot depth of the proposed addition will be in keeping with those features of the existing commercial rear additions which bookend this streetscape on this block, and will maintain the historic continuous rear facade plane of the buildings in this row. That the location of the proposed addition within a paved rear yard in a corner of the block that represents a transitional space between the commercial ends of this 7th Avenue block front and the adjacent perpendicular residential rows along Berkeley and Lincoln Places will maintain the historic open character of the rear yards at these residential rows and will neither isolate a residential rear yard nor significantly reduce the green space within the block. That a large portion of the rear wall of the proposed one-story rear addition will abut the existing full-height brick party wall and rear deck at the adjacent perpendicular building at 181 Berkeley Place, and will therefore be disconnected from and only minimally apparent from the residential rear yards within this block. That the modestly scaled one-story height of the addition and the transparent character of its picket-style parapet railing will further minimize its impact within the block, especially as seen over 6-foot fences and walls found traditionally at rear yards. That the brick material of the proposed addition is in keeping with that of the surrounding rear facades and other rear facades in this historic district. And that the proposed work will maintain the original row house and historic commercial characters of the building and the row, as well as the special architectural and historic character of the building and the Park Slope Historic District.
All in favor? Any opposed? This application is approved.
Commissioners, the next item on the agenda is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, docket number 178243. This is 839 St. Mark's Avenue, located within the Crown Heights North Historic District. This is a high Victorian Gothic-style freestanding mansion designed by Russell Sturgis and built in 1870. The application is to alter the facades, demolish an addition, and construct a new building on the lot. This was first presented on March 22nd, 2016 agenda.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah Ripples, Preservation Staff. This is 839 St. Mark's Avenue in the Crown Heights North Historic District, located at the corner of St. Mark's and Brooklyn Avenues. This proposal first came before you on March 22nd, 2016. It calls for the demolition of the 1930s side addition and construction of a new L-shaped building attached to the mansion at the ground floor. The building will be residential, specifically for assisted living and affordable housing. The Commission had two primary concerns during the public hearing: that the height of the building on the St. Mark's Avenue side detracted from the historic mansion, and that the break in the knee wall and new entrance on the St. Mark's side of the building diminished the primary entrance of the mansion and the historic garden context. This is the original proposal as shown on March 22nd. This is on the Brooklyn Avenue side. And then the first floor plan. Again, the original proposal. This is the St. Mark's side and the Brooklyn Avenue side. The Commission asked the applicants to explore setting back the building after the 4th floor on the St. Mark's side and to relocate that bulk to the Brooklyn Avenue side, and also to explore the relocation of the entrance to preserve the garden context. The applicants have returned today with revisions. The new building on the St. Mark's side is 4 stories with a setback 5th floor, and the building has been raised to a full 6 stories on the Brooklyn Avenue side with no setback. The entrance points to the mansion and the new building have been consolidated to the historic entrance through the garden wall. You would now enter through the existing opening in the knee wall, walk along the inside of the wall, and up an existing path to the new building. The architects did study an alternative, or at least 2 alternative design entrances on the Brooklyn Avenue side, and can answer any questions, but each of those options required a much larger intervention. Those alternatives are available for you in the appendix. And these are the renderings of the revised proposal. You can see the 4 floors here with a setback 5th slightly showing behind the tree, and the full 6 floors on the Brooklyn Avenue side. still has metal paneling, standing seam, and the Brooklyn Avenue side. The team, including Easton Architects, Dayton Architects, and Institute for Community Living, are here to answer your questions.
Do we have any questions for the architects? Any questions? Okay. All right, I think they've been very responsive to our issues and concerns. I know I raised the issue of the entrance along, I think it's Brooklyn Avenue. Just make sure it's on Brooklyn, on St. Mark, sorry. That's where you really see the main entrance to the mansion. And in the previous iteration, they had a separate entrance, and I think it really did feel like they was sort of separating out the lot. So even the small move where they're just having one entrance and the one that's there originally, I think really does address at least a perception from the street that, in fact, it still remains one complex. The other concern that was raised was the massing itself along St. Mark's Avenue. And I think two of the commissioners actually suggested that along Brooklyn Avenue could take more height than on St. Mark's, and they've done that as well. And one thing, I don't know if you can notice over here, that even though just adjacent to the site that they're talking about, there's low-scale buildings, but further down the block on Brooklyn Avenue, you have, again, the higher, like medium-rise buildings. So I think those were the issues that were raised. All right. Are there comments? Yes.
Yeah, I think this is much improved. I agree with you. I think that the variation in the massing is very effective. I think it puts, it's the right, this project is going to be a balance. It's an adaptive reuse of an individual house to do something very important and very, unfortunately, rare, which is to provide some very highly needed low-income housing. So I think, our ability to work with them is very, very important, and I think a positive outcome for this is important for the city. I think that the choice to mass up on Brooklyn Avenue is correct. It has a greater impact on the less important side of the building, and it serves to preserve one of the most distinctive aspects of the building, as noted by the testimony last time, which is the deep garden and small scale of the St. Mark's Avenue side. So I really think that it's quite successful. I think the repurposing of the path is great because it keeps the focus on the landmark and kind of emphasizes the unity of the site. If I were to have one minor reservation, I think that the choice of color, while it works very well along Brooklyn Avenue to blend it in with the townhouse, I think that on the St. Mark's side, it kind of looks a bit discordant to me, and I would, if other commissioners felt that way, certainly they could work with staff to modify that color, but I certainly wouldn't oppose it even as is.
Just on the facade treatment along St. Mark's, I'm not sure it looks discordant. I think actually the neighborhood and the historic district has different materials and colors, and if you look further down the block, you will find brick as well. So I think that I agree with you that this site is, and the proposal is about sort of striking a balance over here. We have a historic district, we have a mansion, which is not an individual designation, but a prominent building on a corner, and we have the fact that this has been occupied by this institution for several decades, and they're fulfilling their mission by providing more affordable housing. And affordable housing has its own, I think, realities to it, including allowing a certain number of units to make it viable. So they've got their funding from HPD and other sources, and they're providing 70 units. And I'm looking at this rendering, and I think it really does sit in quite well, and just the fact that the building is pushed back significantly from the street still allows the mansion to be viewed from several sides, not completely in the round, but it never was to begin with. So I think they've come a long way in addressing the site planning issues as well as ensuring that the historic district's context and is maintained. Are there other comments? Okay, we can move to not designation, but to approval. Yes, Diana?
In the matter of the certificate of appropriateness for Brooklyn. Sorry. Thank you. 178243, 839 St. Mark's Avenue, Crown Heights North Historic District. The application is to alter the facades, demolish an addition, and construct a new building on the lot. I recommend approval, finding that the existing 1930s addition does not relate to the historic mansion in terms of style, scale, and materials, and is not given an architectural style in the designation report. Therefore, its demolition will not detract from the special historic and architectural character of the mansion or the Crown Heights North Historic District. That the demolition of the existing addition will allow for the restoration of the historic facades of the mansion, returning the mansion to a more freestanding building. That the mansion has had substantial additions present at the site for longer than the mansion is freestanding. Therefore, the proposed building is in keeping with this context. That due to the setbacks on Brooklyn Avenue and St. Mark's Avenue, the proposed building height runs into the streetscape and does not overwhelm the neighboring row houses. That setting back the new building from the street wall on both sides of the site allows the mansion to appear in the round and maintains the prominence of the historic mansion at the corner. That the scale and massing of the building, which is lower on St. Mark's Avenue and taller on Brooklyn Avenue, is deferential to and does not overwhelm the historic mansion and is consistent with large apartment buildings on the west side of the district. That the deep setback location of the proposed building along St. Mark's Avenue will preserve the presence of the historic garden context of the house, the lot, and the historic green space. That there is a variety of building types, including row houses, institutional buildings, and large apartment buildings in the surrounding blocks. Therefore, the new building will not detract from the streetscape. That the new building will connect with the historic mansion at the first floor only by means of a glass enclosure, exposing the stone facades and minimizing the physical impact of the new building. That horizontal decorative brick banding and vertical reveals of the facades articulate the mass of the building into row house proportions, which complements the immediate context. That the horizontal brick banding aligns with the eve lines of the mansion and therefore relates to the proportions of the mansion. That the vertical recesses and projecting windows provide subtle depth and articulation that recall the sculptural character of the row houses on the block and within the district, and maintain a solid to void ratio consistent with masonry row houses and apartment buildings within the district, while contributing to the building's contemporary design. That the secondary facades will be in keeping with rear and side facades throughout the district in terms of the simple detailing and ratio solid to void. That the primary use of red brick will relate to traditional building materials found in this district and in the streetscape, and that the supporting materials, including gray middle windows, spandrels, gray brick, and light gray stainless steel paneling at the roof, are subdued and complement the materials palette in the mansion. That the secondary elevations of the building will be clad in a light-colored brick to minimize visibility as the backdrop to the mansion as viewed from St. Mark's Avenue. That the historic hardscape features in the St. Mark's Avenue garden and the perimeter wall and fence will be retained, recalling the historic garden and site conditions. That the proposed entrance utilizes the historic approach and existing garden paths, which allows the historic perimeter wall to remain intact and uninterrupted and reinforces the retention of the garden context. That the proposal will allow for the elimination of the barrier-free access lifts, which detract from the special architectural and historic character of the mansion, and that the proposed work is supported by the ongoing institutional and adaptive reuse of the mansion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? This application is approved.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioners, the next item on the agenda is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, docket number 181126. This is 75 St. Mark's Avenue, located within the Prospect Heights Historic District. This is a neo-Gothic-style row house with a storefront designed by Octave A. Decamp and built in 1878. The application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions and alter the rear yard. This was last presented to the Commission February 16th, 2016.
Good morning, Commissioners. Gabrielle Patowski, Preservation Staff. This application is for 75 St. Mark's Avenue. It's located at the corner of St. Mark's Ave and Flatbush Avenue at the edge of the Prospect Heights Historic District. The proposal was originally presented to the Commission at the public hearing of February 16, 2016. Yes. And at that time, the applicant was proposing a one-story rear yard addition and a two-story rooftop addition. The one-story rear yard addition will be minimally visible through an empty lot at the behind the building, and the proposed two-story rooftop addition was visible over the primary and rear facade. At that time, at the public hearing, the Commissioners asked that the second story of the rooftop addition be eliminated, and that the applicant restudy and reduce the visibility of the rooftop addition and work to improve its relationship to the building and to the rest of the buildings within the row and streetscape. The project architect has done that, and they're back today to present their revisions. Thank you.
We'll reopen the hearing.
My name is Gita Cardone, I'm a Garden architect. I present Patulis, who's the owner. So, like was just mentioned, we actually went ahead and redesigned the addition that we were proposing. This is the original tax photo, and as you can see from, sorry, I'm trying to find a pointer here. As you can see, this is actually our house from the project we're talking about, and it's the lowest house on the entire block, which is basically right on the corner before it turns into apartment buildings, which are no longer landmarks. So this is the landmark delineation line. Just looking down St. Mark's Avenue, it has, for us, the unfortunate aspect is that you can actually see this building from across the main avenue, and its avenue is going up, so it's very visible from the streets. So this was the original. This is the existing building. This was our original proposal, which was to do a relatively high pitched roof with a sloped glazing to hide a lower and upper penthouse. The higher penthouse that was set back. And what we've done is we've eliminated this, lowered this section right here, and then dropped it all the way down so it's below the cornice lines of the neighboring buildings. This is the rear facade, and it's again visible from the parking lot and across the street. This was our original proposal, which was to add 2 stories on top of the existing. The neighboring building next door to us actually are essentially 4 stories high, ours are 3. And then these is the apartment buildings further down, which are actually 1 story higher. So our current proposal is to go ahead and make it essentially the same height as the neighboring buildings in terms of the number of stories, and to drop down below the existing neighbors. These are the mock-ups, our original mock-up, which shows from St. Mark's that you can see the penthouse, and then our current one, which you barely minimally see the top of our parapet. Again, mock-up from across the avenue. And currently, so that is actually the height of our current proposal. And you can see the big buildings behind it. Just further up the street, and again, the same thing, where you can see all the buildings behind us. This is looking down literally from the corner, opposite corner of St. Mark's, and the current proposal shows absolutely no visibility whatsoever. This is from St. Mark's, and again, from St. Mark's, excuse me. Okay. From St. Mark's, you will not see a proposal at all. This was the original, this is the new. Okay. The back facade, this was our original addition, this is the current addition. We're going to go ahead and take away this concrete coping piece and just essentially make it the same height as the buildings next door to us. This is further down the block, there's a park across the way. I just wanted to show you that it was visible from before, right now. These are just mock-ups, essentially using a rendering, our original proposal and our current proposal. Same thing, just across the avenue again. Same views that you're seeing as the mock-up. This was the original proposal with sort of an elevated sloped roof, so we can literally hide the back. And our current one, which is trying to essentially, the sideline from St. Mark's is barely nicks the top. And we have a little penthouse, a little bulkhead, which is sloped back so you only see it. Is there any question?
Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, we did receive a letter from the Prospect Heights Neighborhood Development Council that is still opposing this project. Okay, if there are no other questions, we can close the hearing. Right, comments?
It's been responsive to the commission's concerns.
Responsive to the commissioner's comments, and I think that just lowering both the height of the additional floor and removing one entire floor has, even though in certain cases it will be visible, but it's much less than it was before. It's also on a block that has a couple of additions further down the street, and it's sort of nestled between two taller buildings. And similarly from the rear, it seems that by bringing it down, it just it fits in much more closely with the adjacent buildings. Yes. Okay. All right, Kim?
In the matter of 75 St. Mark's Avenue, Prospect Heights Historic District, the application is to construct a rooftop and rear yard additions and alter the rear yard. I recommend approval, finding that the construction of rooftop and rear addition will not result in damage to or demolition of any significant architectural features of the roof or rear facade, that the rooftop addition will not be visible over the primary facade when viewed from St. Mark's Avenue and will only be minimally visible from a distance from Flatbush Avenue and seen in context with taller adjacent buildings and with rooftop additions or enlargements present at other buildings within the surrounding blocks. That the rooftop addition will be set back from the primary facade and features a sloped roof line and zinc panel cladding, thereby maintaining a sense of the building's historic volume and differentiating it, the addition from the building's historic brownstone facade. That although the rear of the rooftop addition and stair bulkhead will be visible from various vantage points, it will be integrated into the rear facade to read as an additional floor, and the resulting volume will be compatible with the existing building and the surrounding buildings on both sides, some of which are taller in height. That the design of the proposed rooftop addition featuring brick cladding and 3 1/1 double-hung windows and cast stone sills and lintels will be harmonious with the historic materials and fenestration patterns found at the building within the row, many of which are also visible from various vantage points. That the building has an irregular-shaped triangular lot, and the proposed one-story first-floor addition at the rear facade will not eliminate the presence of the rear yard, rise to the full height of the building, or exceed the height of rear additions at neighboring buildings. That the rear addition will be minimally visible from Bergen Street looking through the parking lot located behind the property, and that its simply designed facades will recede from the view and will not detract from the special architectural features of the rear facade. That the added volume of the one-story rooftop addition and one-story rear addition does not overwhelm the building or detract from the adjacent buildings, and that the proposed excavation will be designed and built in compliance with the Department of Buildings regulations and under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer to protect the building.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Application's approved.
Commissioners, the next item is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 183486. This is 1 Wall Street, the Irving Trust, now the Bank of New York building, an individual landmark. This is an Art Deco style skyscraper designed by Ralph T. Walker and built in 1929 to 31. The application is to amend docket 179232 to include signage.
Good morning, Commissioners. Karina Bishop, Preservation Staff. The project before you is 1 Wall Street, an individual landmark located at the intersection of Broadway and Wall Street in Lower Manhattan. The application was first presented at a public hearing on January 19th. At that time, the Commission approved a proposal to create new window and door openings, construct rooftop additions, lower the parapets, alter the Broadway facade at the sidewalk level, and install a canopy and vitrines. A signage program was originally presented to the Commission at the previous hearing, but was removed from the scope of work for restudy at the Commission's request in order to reduce and refine the number of signs and attachment points. The applicants have returned with a revised signage program which incorporates the following changes. The elimination of the 2 originally proposed pin-mounted signs flanking the Wall Street entrance, revising the signage projection at the chamfered corner, and raising the height of the sign from the sidewalk. The multi-bay signage on Broadway now features pin-mounted letters supported by a single raceway attached to the bronze window jambs, revised from the originally proposed double raceway attached to limestone cladding. The other aspects of the signage program remain unchanged, including the bronze plaques and pin-mounted letters on a raceway at Wall Street entrance. Here to present the proposal is Hernan Chabar from Robert Amsterdam Architects.
All right, do we need a presentation on this? Maybe we just have, oh, do you want to say, okay.
If you can vote on it, or I can answer questions, and I allow for it. Yeah, I'll
Okay, be very focused.
Okay. So as Karina mentioned, we...
I'm going to just make a motion to open the hearing.
Here we have where the signage was relocated to line up with Broadway. The 2 signs were deleted on the side, and the detailing for the mounting was changed to single raceway attaching to the bronze itself instead of the stone. This is a rendering of how the revised version would look like. On the sides of the main entrance on 1 Wall Street, we have received feedback to allow the stone edge to show, so we reduced the signage slightly, so the stone edge reads. And on the 1 Wall Street, the main entrance, the main sign, again, we reduced the raceway to a single raceway. At the corner signs, we raised them, allowing for additional, for pedestrians to be able to really appreciate the carved stone. That here it was like a more critical location. Here, as it is raised, most of the detail is visible, and the verticality of the ornament could be seen through. Also, over here, this was the building name, 1 Wall Street, will be located here in a sign that currently says Bank of New York. That was replaced in, I believe, the 60s. Originally, it had the Irving Trust name. Some views from different locations. And this sign just to show in context how the scale of the building versus the scale of the signs.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, we can close the hearing. All right, comments? Michael?
I think in general it's much improved. I personally don't feel that the corner sign is appropriate. I think it of all of them is the most impactful to the mass in reading the building, but I think the others are fine.
Okay, yes. Okay. Any other comments? Yes.
Just make a comment about the vitrine. I understand the reason for the vitrine. I think it's beautifully designed. I think after many pedestrians run into it and injure themselves, it will be removed by the owner, but I don't think it's inappropriate from a landmark point of view, and so I'm not going to vote against it, but I do think it's an impediment to travel. I know this corner extraordinarily well, since my office is just a half block away.
Thank you, Fred. In fact, I think the vitrine we had approved last time around, but I know that part of the reason why we agreed and found it appropriate, or sort of recognized the practical difficulties, how to alert people to adaptive reuse, was to have it at the corner. And from that perspective, it seems we don't necessarily need the sign behind it. So I think that the sign behind that, on that chamfer, seems to be distracting. It does also cover a portion of the carving, and it seems that they could incorporate perhaps the signage into the vitrine since it's at that corner. Otherwise, I agree with the two Michaels. I think the rest of the signage seems fine.
Our concern with the corner signage...
I'm sorry, we've closed the hearing, so, okay? So I think we can move ahead with the decision then. Michael?
All right, thank you, very nice, yes. Regarding 1 Wall Street, the Irving Trust, now Bank of New York building, an individual landmark, the application is to amend docket 17-9232 for the installation of signage. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that given the monumental scale of the building, the proposed signage program is very modest and will not detract from the Broadway and Wall Street facades. The removal of the non-historic incised stone signage featuring the building name at the chamfered corner will not result in the removal of historic fabric, and the proposed inset limestone panel is in keeping with the signage historically found in this location. That there is precedent for plaque signage at the Wall Street entrance, and that the proposed plaque sign is appropriately sized to fit within the decorative limestone banding, that the proposed signage on the raceways at the Wall Street entrance will be attached to flat masonry to minimize damage to fabric and is well scaled to the entrance it serves, that the signage raceways at the Broadway facade will be attached to the window jambs, thereby eliminating the need for multiple penetrations into the decorative limestone, that fluted stone cladding and narrow monumental windows with heavy mullions and decorative metal panels are not readily adaptable for retail use. Therefore, the proposed sign spanning the 2 bays, the Broadway facade, is a solution which is respectful of these features of the facade's composition. That the polished bronze finish of the facade of the signage will match the metalwork at the adjacent windows and doors and will be harmonious with the building's material palette. That the individual letters attached to metal raceways will allow for the facades to be viewed through the sign assembly, and that proposed work is supportive of the adaptive reuse of this individual landmark. However, I find that the proposed signage at the corner, at the chamfered corner, will conceal the vertical band of incised ornament and diminish the visual presence of the chamfered corner. So therefore, I recommend that the proposed signage at the corner be eliminated from the proposal.
That's it. Yes. Right. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Application's approved. Yes, so we will now take a lunch break and be back at 12:15.
30 minutes early.
Give us a break. We didn't do but you would. Triple what? Yeah.
Like the bottom grade, the bottom grade can get go at any point.
What if your bio is not my bio? Several of us use the same bio. It's not a very conventional thing, at least in my experience. I think because there is keeps it way outside. Not too bad.
It's located at the intersection of Broadway, Walker Street to the north, and then Cortlandt Alley on the east. The building historically was used for manufacturing and also for sort of turn-of-the-century travel agency, and then later was converted into office use. And in 2012, as I mentioned, it was approved by the Landmark Preservation Commission, the design by Gene Kaufman. That was for a multifamily residential project. The current project is a 171-key hotel. And so here's the context. The primary facades are located on Broadway and then also Walker Street, the secondary facade on Cortlandt Alley. And then to the south, there's a portion of the facade about 3 to 4 stories on the upper portions of the building, which are visible from the southern street. Here's the existing elevation. The building is actually in pretty good condition at the current time. There's going to be a full restoration of the masonry work, limestone. Also, we're working with staff on sort of ground levels storefronts and also replacement of existing windows, including the first and second floor, and then also 3rd through 10th floor, we're going to be replacing some existing aluminum windows. And the one element which is sort of non-historic that exists currently is an aluminum and glass frame storefront, which is located on the Broadway side on the lower right portion of the page. That will be replaced with the infill, which is more to come. On the south facade, in the upper portion, there are some existing shutters, which are located next to the lot line windows. We'll be keeping them and also restoring them. And then this image on the right is showing the elevation on Cortlandt Alley. Currently, there is a fire escape, which will be removed. And then the lower portion, there's some existing storefronts, which are going to be slightly reconfigured. We'll show that in the presentation. This slide shows the prior approval by Gene Kaufman. So on the lower level, on the Broadway entrance, there was a large sort of glass window that was proposed, wood-framed, painted wood frame, with doors and transom to replace the aluminum infill that's presently existing. And then on the Walker elevation, the full way over on the left-hand side of the page, which is the eastern portion of the building, there was at that time, a new residential entrance that was proposed. That was all glass with a fabric awning over top. And then there were some other louvers that were also added. On the rooftop, there were enclosures for mechanical equipment, also some screen elements and some bulkheads for elevators and stairs as well. It's worth noting, I'm going to mention this a couple times in the presentation, that the dashed red line, which is on the furthest bulkhead to the right on the Walker Street elevation, was actually drawn incorrectly on the Kaufman proposal, and we worked with staff to determine that, and later figured out that the existing bulkhead, using an existing condition surveying company, has that bulkhead about 4 feet to the west. And so I just want to keep noting that it was approved, but it was not actually drawn in the right location. So here we are. This is the proposed elevation on the ground floor on the Broadway side. We're proposing essentially the same storefront that was designed in the Kaufman package. We've done some tweaks to the wood framing around the glass doors and transoms at the recommendation of Higgins Quasabarth, which is the historic consultant for the project. And then to explain the lobby of the hotel, the lobby is divided into 3 different components. On the Broadway side, there will be a cafe, coffee shop. In the center of the building will be the hotel lobby, and then on the Cortland Alley side, which is the full way on the left side of the page, will be the restaurant that is associated with the hotel. It's important functionally that all of these elements have a distinct, independent, recognizable point of entry. And so we're creating a new entrance for the hotel, which you can see almost in the center, slightly off-center on the Walker Street elevation. And we're proposing a very simple marquee to announce that entrance. And we feel that marquee, while it's not sort of well precedented within this particular district, with the scale relative to the building, it's a very sort of subtle addition that gives an appropriate announcement to the entrance of the hotel, but does not overwhelm the historic nature of the building facade. Well, also, there is one precedent which was not constructed across the street, which we'll show later in the presentation. So then the southern elevation and also the Cortland Alley side, as proposed by the Kaufman design, you can see a slightly reconfigured storefront on Cortland Alley, which was to be used primarily as a loading dock, and then also the removal of the fire escape. And we're going to be proposing the same thing because when the fire escape was installed, there was damage done to the existing brickwork and limestone. That will be fully restored back to the original condition. And then we see the profile of the additions on the roof for the Kaufman design up top. And then our proposal with of the storefront along Cortland Alley, which will match very much in character with the Walker Street and also the Broadway side with wood-framed glass openings. This will be the sort of primary entrance to the restaurant again. Also, the removal of the fire escape, as previously mentioned. The existing fire shutters will be repaired and restored. New fire shutters will not be added. We'll just keep the existing. And then the new profile of the bulkhead up top. Later in the presentation, I'll show more detailed a comparison of the Kaufman design with ours. Plan-wise, the upper image is the existing bulkheads. There's an existing elevator bulkhead located on the left, a stair bulkhead, and then a service elevator bulkhead on the right. This is our proposed plan on the bottom. I'm actually going to skip to the next slide, which shows the Kaufman proposal up above. And here you can see all the different mechanical room enclosures and stair enclosures and so forth. And then our design on the bottom. So the center portion in between the two bulkheads has now been eliminated. That's now open. And what we're showing is on the left side of the page and sort of on the Walker Street, along the Walker Street elevation, will be a public terrace, which is for use of the hotel guests, a sort of lounge space with fantastic views up and down Broadway. Also worth noting is the stair, which is shown to the right of that restroom volume, is a historic stair on the inside of the building, which we actually lobbied with DOB to have maintained. In the Kaufman design, that stair was eliminated and a new stair was put in. But we got a determination to keep the existing stair in its current configuration with winders and so forth. That actually resulted in part in increasing that bulkhead directly above the stair, which will show more detail in a bit. In addition, in the Kaufman design, which was not shown in the LPC proposal, there was a cooling tower on the northeast side of the building. And what we decided to do is to use a split mechanical system to distribute condensers across the roof as much as possible and limit the presence of a kind of singular mechanical unit on the roof. And then below are the bulkhead roofs. So we have condensers that are on top of all of those roofs. And as you'll see in the elevation, that's where we have a kind of screening element above the bulkhead. So visibility studies, this is a view from Baxter Street, which looks along Walker Street back towards the building. This is about 600 feet from the site. And we spent a lot of time in the neighborhood and wanted to make sure that the volumes that we were proposing on top of the building were in scale and character with other buildings in the surrounding context. And as you can see in the foreground, there's some buildings with mechanical enclosures and equipment, water towers and so forth that we feel are in line with the proposed addition. This is a view from Center Street, one block closer to the building. Again, with the building to the west across Broadway kind of obscures the addition of the service elevator. and elevator bulkheads that are being proposed on top of the roof. This is a view from Canal Street, looking back on Cortlandt Alley. You see the service elevator volumes, also screened for mechanical equipment up on top. This is a very limited view, disassociated from the remainder of the facade that you get quickly as you're sort of walking down Canal Street. And here we have a view looking down Broadway from the north side of Canal, about 400 feet away from the site. And so you're seeing on the right image that bulkhead, which really ends right at that line of the next building that's sort of framing the view. And then a view from Broadway looking directly up at the building. From this view, from this vantage point, there's actually no change. And then a little bit further south, however, you do see a sort of increase in the size of the bulkhead. The existing bulkhead, as you can kind of make out from behind the mesh in the left image, has a kind of articulated profile. It goes back, so we would be filling in that articulated profile. And again, the goal of that is to really maintain this historic stair, which is traveling down the building and giving that stair access to the roof. So further down, a view from Leonard Street. This view is almost identical, with a little bit of that sort of articulated profile of the existing bulkhead being filled in on the right. And yeah, those are the visibility studies. So again, we'll be working with staff to work on the sort of window replacement. We're also adjusting a bit the proportions of the Gene Coughlin approved study to make sure that all the windows are vertical in orientation. There's a corner of the building, which I think was involved in a car accident at one point, that was replaced haphazardly with a fiberglass replication of the stone. We're going to be restoring that stone at the base of the building. And really the whole facade will be completely restored. So the next two slides really show in detail the relationship of the Kaufman profile, which is dashed in red, versus what we're proposing. So on the left side of the page, there's an increase in height for the service elevator. Our original intention was to keep the existing service elevator, which had been proposed in the Kaufman design. That was an old drum-style elevator, and when we went to do some preliminary probes in the building, discovered that elevator was no longer functional. It was going to take a lot of sort of financial resources for the owner to repair, so we're going with the new modernized elevator, which will be taken to the roof then in this case, and that's the reason for the additional height on that service elevator. That's about 9'6" difference in height from the previous elevator. In the sort of left center zone is the passenger elevator bulkheads were about 2 feet higher in that case, and then middle right, Gene Kaufman actually had a zone which had been infilled with different types of mechanical spaces. That's going to be eliminated. And then full way to the right again, we're infilling for that stair access to the roof. And as you can see in the shaded portions, those are actually all perforated metal screens, painted light gray aluminum, which will shield the condensers on the roof. And then this is the similar study from the south side of the street, showing the variation in profile. The goal really here is to, because it's a different type of use than what that had been proposed from the Kaufman design, there is a much more heavy sort of mechanical requirement, but we're trying to limit it, distribute it in a similar manner, and keep the amount of addition to the bulkhead as minimal as we possibly can. And then further detail showing storefront comparisons, which is probably more germane for the staff level.
All right, are there questions? Any questions? Yes.
Is any of the mesh that you're doing on in front of the units that are on top of your bulkhead, is any of that for sound, or is that all for visual?
It does have an acoustic value in that it limits the sound. However, these units are actually quite quiet, so it's really to kind of create a more continuous visual effect for the bulkhead.
All right, I have a question, and if you go to your approved and proposed roof plans, one thing about the Kaufman proposal is it seems they pushed all the mechanicals towards the real world. So you have three sides of the building has three frontages, and they put it all against the lot line portion of the building, so away from the street. And I think what you've done is you have some of your mechanicals that come closer to the street line. And so it's actually more visible, and it sort of rises above the cornice line. So couldn't you relocate that to the lot line so it's away from the street?
Yeah, it is possible to, that we could take a look at that. One of the goals that the owner has, obviously, is to kind of consolidate as much of the public area as possible, and, very interested in holding on to that space because of the great views to the south and the city, but that is something.
Couldn't you put it right in the middle of the bar?
Yes, I think it doesn't quite fit exactly, but it is something that we could take a look at.
I think you want to try and move it away as far from the edges as possible. Okay. Do we have any other questions? All right, in that case, we can close the hearing. All right, comments? Yes.
I would just agree with you that moving it away from the lot line would be much preferable.
Yes. I think they could, in terms of that screening on the top, which is the most visible part of the proposal, since you are seeing that bulkhead and those screened AC units from a rather far distance from below, I think they could work with staff to lower it, because even though in elevation it almost covers the top of the units, because you're seeing at an angle, the likelihood of your seeing the top, even if you dropped it down, you'd still mask the units and perhaps reduce the impact of that addition.
Okay. Any other comments? So why don't we recommend that they work with staff on both, essentially they should work with staff to reduce the visibility to the farthest extent possible. So it means relocating some of the mechanicals towards the lot line portion of the building, or reduce the bulkheads as well. Okay? Michael, do you want to read that?
In the matter of 396 Broadway in the Tribeca East Historic District, an application to amend the Certificate of Appropriateness 127790, which approved the construction of a rooftop addition, installation of storefront infill, and alteration to the facade. I recommend approval with some modifications, finding that the removal of the masonry bulkhead at the Walker Street facade, which had been previously altered at other openings for additional entrances, and the installation of a new compatible wooden glass entrance infill will have no measurable impact on the base of the building at this full block facade. That the proposed metal canopy at the new Walker Street entrance will be simply designed and modest in terms of its proportions, in keeping with entrance and service canopies sometimes found on buildings of this age and style. That the south facades of the proposed bulkheads, which will be enlargements of the existing bulkheads both vertically and horizontally, will retain their painted masonry finish matching the lot line wall, thereby differentiating themselves from the painted metal finishes of the remainder of the new work. In the presence of the proposed metal and masonry bulkheads, mechanical equipment and metal screening will be in keeping with the types of visible rooftop accretions commonly found in this historic district, and the applicant will work with staff to either move the equipment or somehow reduce its visibility, and work with the staff to reduce the impact of the acoustical screening.
All in favor? Any opposed? Application is approved.
Commissioners, the next item is an application for certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 174506. This is 17 Barrow Street, located within the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a modified federal-style row house built in 1834. The application is to legalize facade alterations completed without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits and to install storefront infill. This was first presented at the public hearing of September 8th, 2015.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Augustine, Preservation Staff. I present to you an application for 17 Barrow Street, which is located between 7th Avenue South and West 4th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. 17 Barrow Street was originally one of a pair late Federal style building, built in 1834 and modified in the late 19th century to house a blacksmith and stable at the ground floor. The application was first presented at a public hearing on September 8, 2015. The proposal is to legalize facade alterations completed without landmarks permits and to install storefront infill. At the previous public hearing, the Commission took no action on the proposal. The main comments at this hearing were to include a stronger argument in the presentation, conduct more research on the history of the building, and to include more documentation of the previous condition of the stuccoed arch. The applicants have returned with additional historic photographs. The proposed design has not changed though, which includes leaving the decorative cast iron piers exposed, which were uncovered when the arch was removed, and the installation of wood and glass operable doors that are reminiscent of carriage house doors. Anita Brandt, the architect of the project, is here to make the argument for appropriateness and answer any of your questions to the proposal.
Will we open the hearing?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? I'm a little shorter than me. Our project is located at 17 Barrow Street in Greenwich Village, Historic District. The earliest photos we could find was the 1940s tax photo. We were unable to confirm when the arch was installed or if it had been replaced or modified over the years. The history of 17 Barrow is an interesting one because it reflects the adaptation to the changing needs of the 19th century. Last year, the tenant in the space removed the arch without LPC permission because it was in danger of falling down. The outcome of this failing ornamental arch is that once removed, it revealed historic structural details. These photos reflect the flimsy construction of the arch, obviously not a true arch made of stone, but rather made of a wood frame with thin stucco and an ornamental crest that was fashionable at the time. The arch construction obscured this ground floor alteration, that is, to make a wide opening that was suitable to catering to horses. We are presented with what will this building look like for perhaps the next 100 years. And given the opportunity, we present to you this design, referencing the earlier use as revealed by the ornamental cast iron pilasters. The history of the building, built in 1834, is a late Federal-style building, which originally was a half of a double set of buildings. So interestingly enough, there was the bay furthest to the left was a horse walk, which allowed the horses to get into the backyard. In the late 19th century, an Irish blacksmith named Michael Hallinan purchased the building and renovated it for his horseshoe operation. Known as the Greenwich Village blacksmith in his op-ed piece in the New York Times, Hallinan invented a rubber horseshoe that won him awards internationally. Later, the building was converted into a restaurant. Restoring the cast iron opening honors the era that New York City was powered by horses and the interesting inventor who shoed them. The Federal style characteristics are of an architectural simplicity, modest structures with classic proportions and almost planar smoothness. Many of these buildings have been modified to add a third story, and very few of these early Federal-style buildings remain. The architectural history of 17 Barrow is typical of many of these Federal-style buildings, Although it underwent alterations in the 19th century, it still retains the important elements of the federal style. Our design, rather than to rebuild the arch, once again, obscure the historic elements of this building, we propose to restore the only original architectural elements remaining at the ground floor. Our design reflects the federal style in its simplicity. It reflects an important time in New York City history with the use of horses, the mixed-use nature of the residential above a commercial occupancy. It retains the original materials of the cast iron pilasters and the bumpers to protect from the carriages. Our design includes a small blade sign. It allows for legal width ADA compliant doors on either side of the wide opening, and is painted in a off-white paint similar to what would have been used at that time. The next couple of slides are pictures of references in Greenwich Village. The one on the left, I think, is particularly appropriate in that it shows a boarding and livery stables with an entrance to the left, a wide opening for the carriages and horses, and what appears to be residential above. The other elements here are on Barrow Street, also reflecting a time when the buildings were modified to accommodate horses. On the right is an existing example of what the horse walk was and illustrated in the photograph as well. This proposal strives to contribute to the next chapter of this landmark building and to respect and contribute to the neighborhood that emulates a collective appearance and the spirit and the character of old New York City. I don't know if that's the last one?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
Who determined that the original arch was in poor condition and was about to fail?
Well, it was done by the restaurant as they were repairing the doors, and if we look at the pictures that I was able to get, we can see that it had been heavily painted and was kind of deteriorated the wood.
Paint's usually not a problem, so the restaurant owner made that decision?
Yeah, it was before my involvement.
Not an architect or a structural engineer?
Not that I know of, no.
Yes, Fred, and then Michael.
It appears on page, are they not numbered? Maybe they're not. This one.
Yes? Can you go to that page, Egbert?
Yeah.
The next one?
No,
Next
I
one.
think it's the next one. Yeah, that one. It appears as if the proposed scheme on the right is lifting the lintel to the height of the lintel over the door.
I think that's...
The amount of brick below the windows on the second floor is greater, I mean, is less than the proposed.
I think that's a rendering artistic allowance. The intent is to keep the original steel lintel, the big steel lintel.
Just a comment, I mean, that's a pretty serious artistic allowance for us to accept, but thank you for clarifying it.
Okay, yes, Michael.
On that same image, and it's consistently through the presentation, there seems to be some kind of patterning to the white paint. Is that just an artistic license, or is that intended some faux finish?
No, it's just intended to be sort of a white, so it didn't, no faux finish. Just simple white paint.
If I could just, I mean, in the future, I think a simple elevation maybe is more important for us to see than this.
Well, maybe if we go to the drawing without the color, I think the color is maybe easier to interpret, but...
See, that's wrong.
We got a little carried away. Sorry about that.
Model from.
Yes, yes, of course.
Showing at a level with the door.
In your experience, is that color,
Both of
red
them.
color, those colors
Yeah.
typical of that kind of intervention?
This is a conundrum for me because there's so much that's anachronistic about this reproduction. In the federal period, there would have not been cast iron pilasters surrounding this thing. There wouldn't have been cast iron until probably the 1899 photograph. So I have an issue with that. Yeah, the buff is it's actually been more OW7. That's a typical federal period trim color, appropriate trim color. There's so much of this proposed federal design that is painfully anachronistic to me that I'm having big problems with it. If it was a stable, we wouldn't have had 8 light or 9 light or 10 light glass lights over the door. You would have had barn doors on this thing. So there's a lot that's troubling me about it, but the paint color is the least of them.
Well, to the extent that the cast iron, though, is a historic artifact, not original to the building, but old, would that have been the color that would have been used?
That being the case, take a look at the 1899 photograph. That's the direction you would want to go.
Okay. Are there other questions? Okay, we can close the hearing. All right, comments? Yes, Michael.
I have some troubles with much of this design. I think to try and return this to a federal period facade is not appropriate. And so I would want to see this come back with a design that is more closely related to the 1899 image of which we have actual evidence on this building. So that's...
I think that's actually not the building, it's just another, it's on 12th Street, I believe.
Right, it's the model.
It's much more closely related to what should be happening on this facade.
Right, but the issue with the facade, okay, let me just sort of raise the first question, which is the removal of the arch. Okay, so we don't have...
No choice, it's gone.
It's gone?
The reason would be rather than a bogus attempt.
Okay, all right, so then we're talking about really how, we're talking about the aesthetics or the historical references to the infill. And yes, so your comment is that it's incongruent the way it is right now? Because, I'm just trying to understand, because of,
It's a federal building that was modified in the late Victorian period. And so attempting to kind of make it, to kind of both retain the late Victorian elements, i.e. the cast iron pilasters, and I mean, the header is not really being retained, it's being covered over with a new molding of some kind, but to kind of play off of the cast iron as the starting point for the design, and then to say that, and then to kind of federalize it with the mullioned doors and the paint color might be a kind of a mishmash, you know, you're taking a little from column A, a little from column B. And if we are doing a somewhat, let's call it a creative recreation to a period about which we know very little for this particular building, I think at least you got to go with what you got, which is those pilasters. And if those pilasters were dating from the late Victorian period, you got to go with the late Victorian period restoration or, you know, creative recreation. I mean, but I would say it is very unfortunate that what was an example of a very charming, idiosyncratic, artistic intervention in the village, the kind of thing that made the village so charming and special, was just ripped off. You can't go back and make them recreate it. that would be bogus too, but I think that it leaves us with no good solution.
Well, I agree with all of that, and I think this is a conundrum is a good word for it. Because what we're saying on the right is really just false. It's a completely made-up sort of Disney World kind of thing, and I think it would confuse the public. They'd look at that and say, oh, look at this wonderful federal style. It has nothing to do except maybe in some of its upper level with federal, it was all changed. What's more honest, unfortunately, and maybe we don't like it, but what's more honest is the image on the left.
The existing condition.
Honestly. I mean, there's some sort of another infill, but it's been gashed, it's been changed, but it's real and legitimate. So I don't know where it leaves us, but it's...
With the ghost of that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's honesty. I mean, I think it's a real... It's a philosophical issue which invades preservation from time to time, and I think it's invading our discussion right now, but I think it's a worthwhile thing to talk about. Because what's on the right is really, the more I think about it, and you all brought it up,
So practically speaking, you'd be saying, leave the pilasters, leave the exposed steel channel, leave the infill piers, and what? Do what with the doors? We've let people put in doors.
Yeah, no, I think you got to do something with that. I don't know what's there. What is it?
What would be appropriate to...
Just to clarify, I think that we all caught that there was a rendering error here. In fact, that what they are proposing is just to keep the steel just as it is and not to apply I guess it might have been wood to extrude it at the lintel. It's
very important because of this.
Yeah.
Right, that's another.
So are they just asking to legalize what they have right now?
Well, in terms of just keeping the cast iron elements uncovered, they're not applying additional wood elements on top, but just as this shows.
Well, that's very clear.
But are they adding, are the doors there? The two middle doors, are they there?
The infill is what they're proposing, is just the...
That's what I thought. The influence, what they're proposing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of drafting error, a miscommunication between the draftsperson and the conservator architect.
Okay. Why don't we bring this back again?
Fix the
We
drawing.
won't take any action.
Can we give them any more guidance?
Yes, you have some comments, yes.
I know, I'm just wondering if we can give them any more guidance. It's clear that we want to see the exposed cast iron pieces that are left, plasters and so on. But is there anything else that...
One question I would ask is, what's the staff's consideration about the brickwork? I mean, clearly there's a lot of repair to the brickwork around the opening. You see the change from the Flemish bond to some other situation. I mean, was there any intended modification of that at all? Was the intention to leave it as is?
I think the intention was to leave it as is.
Leave it as is.
Well, there you go then.
All right, so in terms of just sort of direction for them, I think that the feeling amongst the commissioners, what they propose right now, and it's fake, and there's some dissonance with the federal style and trying to recreate something that's in keeping with that style, and we're looking for something which maybe just speaks to the period where there's more evolution of these homes. So it's to, right?
Rather than harking back
Right.
to something that actually doesn't exist.
Okay.
But also, I think we need to see something more accurate. Let me just point out.
Yes, that too. So I think we don't want, right,
Is not that.
right. I think it is sort of,
Is it a mistake in the drawing?
Look, I think we got to change our Google SketchUp budget into a Photoshop budget and just Photoshop in the doors and call it a day.
so in fact, it may be, in fact, a simplified version of what they're proposing right now, which is maybe gussied up too much or something. So, okay. These are all terms of art and historic preservation, so anyway, so we will, and the staff will work with them on that, so we won't take any action, we can come back with a more clear proposal.
Okay, so we're actually going to shift 2 items. We're going to move to 1143 Fifth Avenue, located within the Carnegie Hill Historic District. This is docket number 177124. It's an application for a certificate of appropriateness. It's a neo-federal style apartment building designed by J.E.R. Carpenter and built in 1922-23. The application is to construct a multi-story rooftop addition and rear yard addition, alter secondary facades, and install a new sidewalk garden. And this was first presented November 10th, 2015, and a public meeting of March 8th, 2016.
Good afternoon, Victor Timonik, Preservation staff. This is 1143 Fifth Avenue. As Jared mentioned, this was first presented at a public hearing in November of last year. That proposal was to construct a multi-story addition that was aligned with the street wall. The commission took no action on that item, and the applicant came back to the March 8th public meeting with a proposal to construct a setback one-story addition on top of the existing penthouse with stair and elevator bulkheads and screened mechanical equipment. The commission took no action on that proposal and asked the applicant to reduce visibility, determine whether the elevator service was required by DOB at the roof of the penthouse, and restarted the fenestration and finishes. And the applicant has done that and is here to clarify.
Will we open the hearing?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dominic Pella. Last time we were in front of you a little while ago, and since then we've made some additions, some changes and modifications. You all know the building, and I'd like to go right to the... Can you speak up? Sure. This is the existing conditions of 1143. This is our proposed modification. Since the last time we met, we listened to comments and made some adjustments. We've since then lowered the rooftop addition 2.5 feet, thereby lowering the bulkheads as well. We now have a different facade, a 4 bay punched window fenestration. You can see the existing versus previously proposed and our current modification. You can see the alignments and the change in elevations. So the penthouse addition, we're at 94 feet 6 inches. That's 2.5 feet lower than the previous. We still have our bulkheads. They can come down accordingly. Our materials have changed. We've changed out the limestone previously presented to a brick facade, which relates back to the historical facade. Again, you can see in section the existing with the water tower, the proposed, and previously proposed. Again, the relationships of the sections to the building, front penthouse, first 2 stories, and the elevator bulkhead, and the scissor stair bulkhead. Existing, first proposed, and these are our plans. The elevator does go to the roof, and we did research, obviously, if it's required. We have a rooftop that's accessible to the building, and we would like to keep the elevator to the roof above everything else for safety. If there was an emergency, we'd like to get to the roof and bring down.
Is it required by code, or it's just?
No,
Okay.
no, it's not. But every rooftop accessible space that I've ever designed has an elevator going to it, meaning for recreational space.
But it's recreational space only for the unit, correct?
Only for the unit.
Okay.
And the bulkhead is set back. The elevator bulkhead and the stair bulkhead is set back 16 feet from the penthouse front facade. That material is a metal panel. It's to separate aesthetically in the function. From the street, you're not seeing it. From some of the vistas from the park, you will see it, but you'll see other bulkheads as well. I think you know the existing penthouse, the way it looks today. Existing versus proposed, without mock-up on top of the existing. Existing water tower. So, the existing view, and you can see where we're taking the pictures from in plan, and what you see from the street, and you can see the bulkhead as a shadow in the back. Again, the vantage point, as you approach the building, you're still relatively close to the building, and you start to peek out and see it. But the bulkhead has got the same material now, brick and limestone accents. And from deep inside, off Fifth Avenue, you start to see the relationship. The tower's gone, obviously, and our bulkhead appears to be somewhat of a shadow behind it. And from Fifth Avenue, again, where we see the bulkhead, the existing penthouse, now we see our new penthouse addition, so it creeps up a little bit above that. Existing, this is, obviously you can see the arrows where we're taking the pictures, and where the mock-ups are and the views, and it starts to get screened from distance, but everything else starts to come into play at this distance. So it's not just the bulkhead and addition on our building, but it's everything else that's in the vista is part of the view now. This is obviously, without leaves, this is probably the best view you could have at the time of the year at this location, and existing rooftops. Just to give you context. And this is a proposed rear yard modification, addition. Again, looking at the existing rear yard views of the surrounding buildings, the condition of the buildings around them, and this is what we're proposing, the existing, and you've seen this already. So I don't want to take up too much of your time on that. But the big changes, or the salient changes, are the material, the height changes, and reducing the height.
All right, do we have other questions? Yes, Fred?
Is the intent that the brick on the Fifth Avenue elevation and the two top stories would match the existing brick? Because the rendering makes it look a little darker.
No, the intent is
to match as closely as possible.
Yeah, as closely as possible. We abandoned a limestone facade, so we're trying to make it more germane to the existing facade. So the intent is to try to match it. I mean, it's not going to be exactly the same as far as fenestration, but even the window surrounds is supposed to match the existing surrounds. And if I can get to that. Yeah, so maybe this, sorry. So the existing, and you can see the front, it's supposed to match. I mean, that's the intent.
Michael?
And this is a picture to look at. Given that you're trying to match the four openings and the brick material, why did you choose to change the spacing and the alignment of the windows and the operation or style of the windows?
Well, because it is a different, it's a penthouse. It has some separate qualities. It's not right up on the facade. It can, it doesn't have to follow. The windows, they swell and they get a little bit bigger to let more light in, but they are center aligned. So we're not trying to hide the fact that they swell or get bigger, but we are trying to respect the rhythm and the spacing.
Let's talk about the rhythm and the spacing. The rhythm and the spacing is different, right? Because you have a pretty much a equal spacing on the lower levels, and you, even though your windows are larger, which I'm not saying is a bad or a good thing, chose to go wide, narrow, wide.
But I have the cheek walls there. From a structural standpoint, I want the cheeks on the end. And so if I go back to the front here, where I can show you the front facade. Right, so the spacing in between the windows is reduced, but the cheeks on the side...
So you're aligning the outer edges of your windows, and then the infill is different.
Right, so we swell the windows to get more aperture, but I want those cheek walls structurally.
Okay, other questions? I just have one question. If you go to LPC 5, which is the section.
Yes.
So I know in our discussion last time, part of the argument was there's already an existing setback and a one-story building, which is fairly tall. And I think some of us expressed that are there ways to make the 2 floors lower, so it reads generally in the same bulk as what you have right now. So I'm looking at the section, and I'm just wondering whether the way you've dimensioned it, it seems like you can reduce it.
Dimension the 2 floors themselves?
Yes.
So we have, I think last time in front of you, we had a proposal where we were raising that roof level and creating unobstructed views from that penthouse, from that level. So we're keeping it down at the existing roof height, and the elevation that we have is a 9-foot elevation.
From what to what?
Right, it just seems like it's floating, so...
From baseboard to molding? 9 feet?
No, it's not supposed to be. It's a 9-foot structure. It's from floor to ceiling is 9 feet clear. That's our dimension. And then
Is that the thickness of the ceiling?
The structure, the beams that are...
Oh, the beams?
Topped. So we have steel and concrete, and that's to the bottom side of our beams.
Okay.
So what's the floor to floor?
Well, the existing is 9'6", and so that's what we're respecting.
Floor to floor?
Floor to ceiling. Floor to ceiling is 9'6", and so what we're showing is a 9-foot from finished floor to drop of beams. And then existing, we have 9'6" from finished floor to ceiling. And then the new level, we're proposing it as a 8-foot ceiling to floor. And that constituted a 2'6" drop from the previous proposal. Because we were raising the 8th floor by 18 inches, and we took that out.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, we can close the hearing. All right, comments? Well, before we go into comments, let me just note that we received 6 letters in opposition from Friends of J.E.R. Carpenter, Carnegie Hill Neighbors, Historic Park Avenue, Historic District Council, and Congressman Carolyn Maloney. So I just wanted to enter that into the record. All right, comments? Yes, Diana?
I'm a little troubled by the visibility of this from Fifth Avenue. And I'm concerned that also the use of the brick to try to make it look, comparable to the building gives me the feeling that it is like a building. To me, it appears a bit as a building addition, though it's obviously subsidiary, but I'm troubled by the fact that it's visible Fifth Avenue.
Others?
I agree. I mean, I think there's two levels of visibility. Obviously, from the park, anything's going to be visible. Not that that's to diminish it. But I think the fact that it remains visible from Fifth Avenue is problematic. But more for me, the problem is that I remember last time the proposal was to do a building whose aesthetic and materials and fenestration, in the case of a visible addition to a building by a noted architect, were completely divorced from and not recognizing the building to which it was appended. So I think the recommendation at the time was to try to make them talk to each other a little bit better. And I think that the decision here is attempting to address that. I'm not sure how successfully it does it. I think it does, it takes, it's trying to relate by the brick, the style of the openings, the number of openings. But I think the result is that you take what was meant to be a facade building, a simple kind of neo-Renaissance-y kind of block, and it turns it into a Art Deco-ish almost setback building, where the setback is meant to be viewed, and is viewed in concert with and as an extension of the building below it. And to me, that seems kind of odd. The second thing is the fenestration. It's like it's almost an extension, and almost a literal extension, because it has the four openings and the brick and the jambs, and then it's different. I mean, it looks to me like it's neither here nor there. I mean, I think that the images that showed setback penthouses along Fifth Avenue are perhaps notable because they're rendered in different materials that suggest rooftop additions, usually metal and glass, or metal, or stucco. There's something about them that says, don't look at me, I'm on top of this well-composed building, but I'm just a mess up here, and that's kind of the way it is for penthouses. I think that this could benefit a little bit from that distinction, where what is on top, what we're clearly not meant to look at as part of the composition of the building. There should be a relationship, it should be subservient, but I think that this is trying to kind of go about that in a not successful way.
I was a little slow in coming to my thoughts on this one, but I think I'm there. The J.E. Carpenter building is a really handsome building. The proportions are subtle but powerful. I don't have a problem with seeing a little bit more of a rooftop addition, but I think what I'm seeing is not right yet. I think I'm echoing some of Michael's points. I think the windows are too large. I mean, after all, there's a bedroom and a bathroom I just looked at the plan on the top floor. They don't need to be that large. I think somehow, if it's not right yet, which is your point, and I think I could accept the two floors, I think, but I think they have to, it has to be a very elegant proportion, like the base of the building. Regarding the rooftop above that, I understand going to the having the elevator go up. I think it's wedged between these two much bigger buildings. I think if the base, if the bottom two floors of the addition were okay, I think going to the roof with the elevator probably could be all right. Partly, it's replacing, one might say, the water tower that would be removed, which is actually higher than this thing. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Okay, others?
I worried about the proportions also, and I just wondered about that on the penthouse itself. That glass patio door, I don't think is helping either. Though I don't think, it fades away a little more, but it could get back into proportion with the rest of the openings.
Which level are we talking about, Kim? Right at the top?
At the top.
Okay. All right. I mean, for me, I think that having some rooftop addition may be appropriate. I think it's because they already have one. I think they have two buildings on either side. I think so, even if it's visible from both Fifth Avenue and from the park, I think it's okay because we've seen that as a part of the building. And in terms of the height, I know I'm sort of picking at that because I think for me it's easier to come to a decision about appropriateness if it's sort of generally in the ballpark of what there is right now. But it seems, I'll accept that they've tried to bring it as low as possible. I would agree with Fred in terms of the bulkhead above that. If it's set back and it's distinguished in its color and how it's treated, can be looked at as more like water towers and other accretions that you see at the roof level. And in terms of just the aesthetics of the building itself, I know it was one thing last time, and I think we all sort of responded to the aesthetics of that, and now they've gone the other direction, and it seems that the Commission's still not there as yet, so I'm just trying to think of sort of how to, since we can't really design it for them, what's the best way to give them some direction in terms of addressing the facade? I mean, they can look at other examples. I think you had talked about that as well.
I think the first place to look would be to look at other J.E.R. Carpenter buildings and see what penthouses look like on them.
Right.
I think they're starting to look at, there were some images shown of Fifth Avenue penthouses, most of which predate LPC, oversight of those areas, but I think that maybe post-LPC designation approved penthouses along Fifth Avenue might be a couple to look at. I think that's a good start.
Okay, so we'll ask them to come back again. Is that fine? And but the Commission is okay with the two-story addition? Okay, so they can work with staff on the aesthetics and we'll bring it back.
Baby steps.
Okay, Commissioners, we're actually going to skip again. We're going to go to the last item on the agenda, and then we'll work our way backwards. So the next application is an application for an advisory report, Borough of Manhattan, docket number 182892. This is Riverside Park at 113th Street. This Riverside Park is a scenic landmark. This is a plaza area constructed in the late 1930s around a monument designed by John Horvey in 1926 within an English Romantic style park built in 1873 to 85 and designed by Frederick Law Olmsted with modifications and additions built in 1934 to 37 and designed by Clifton Lloyd and Gilmore Clark. The application is to reconstruct the plaza and install a granite monument. And this would be an advisory report because they will end up going to the Public Design Commission, where there will be a public hearing.
This was before, and the rest is crushed. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ann Jennings, Preservation Staff. This application is located in the Riverside Park and Riverside Drive Scenic Landmark at West 113th Street. The proposal is to enlarge an existing plaza and an existing monument, the Kossuth Monument, and install an additional monument at the plaza and modify pathways. The applicants are here to discuss the proposal.
Hi, good afternoon. Jonathan Kuhn. I'll keep my remarks to about 15 seconds, I think. I'm really here just to present Margaret Bracken, who will give you the full presentation. I'd also like to introduce Stephen Gugliash, an engineer associated with the committee to erect a memorial to the Hungarian Revolution of 1956, excuse me. We were approached, there was one in 1848, and that's the connection here. We were approached to erect a new monument. We felt that probably in 21st century New York it wasn't quite right, but we felt we had an ideal location in which to complement an existing monument, the one to Kossuth from the 1920s, honoring the Revolution of 1848. And so I think I'll leave it at that and turn it over to Margaret to walk you through the details.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The project is at the tip of an existing landscape island. The landscape island runs from 110th Street to 113th Street on Riverside Drive. Contextually, the site faces Riverside Park. It's part of Riverside Park. It faces Riverside Park and backs onto the residential area of Riverside Drive with institutions and commercial businesses to the east. The existing layout, as Jonathan said, there's an existing monument there constructed in 1928 to Laszlo Kossuth, who was involved in an earlier revolution from 1848 through 1848 to 1849. The black square in the northernmost tip of the images there represents the Kossuth statue. It sits on a Milford pink granite plinth on a stepped base, and is surrounded by a 5-foot apron of natural cleft granite. The Kossuth monument is at the northern tip of the island, and there's also another monument on the island as well. If you look down to the south of the image on the left, that's the Tilden monument, which sits at the high point of the island. This is the existing monument to Laszlo Kossuth. Bronze figures designed by sculptor John Horvey, dedicated in 1928. And there you see the Milford pink granite base and the existing plantings. This shows you the natural cleft granite apron around the monument and the base itself. Both of the monuments are connected by a curvilinear stone screenings path. Connects both of the monuments, and then it also runs down to an existing bus stop on Riverside Drive. The monument, Riverside Park was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, and the first sections of the park opened in the 1880s. In the late 1930s, the park was extended westward under Park Commissioner Robert Moses, and much of the park design, although the defining characteristics are Olmstedian, much of the design that we see today and the materials that we see today were installed in the late 1930s, as is true. It's a multi-layered park in every respect, and particularly in the history. The materials that we see here today were actually installed in the late 1930s. The bluestone and the slim 4-inch concrete curb were installed in the late 1930s. And as I said, the stone screenings path that you see the tip of in the bottom image there was installed in a capital project in the late 1990s. So these images show you the curvilinear stone screenings path. The landscape context for the existing monument is in fairly good condition. The bluestone is in decent condition. The monument itself is a little bit lost in the existing plantings. They're evergreens. They're yews and Manhattan euonymus, which were planted a long time ago and have grown to somewhat obscure the actual monument. And shade for the site is provided by 2 large existing American elm trees, so it's a fairly shady site. And there's also a pipe rail fence that sort of encloses part of the existing landscape. We have, as Jonathan said, in terms of the siting of this monument, we have a history on Riverside Drive and in Riverside Park of the installation of these monuments, beginning with General Grant's tomb in 1897, and through most recently 2003, when the Ralph Ellison monument by Elizabeth Catlett was installed at 149th Street. So this is sort of an extension of basically ongoing installation of these wonderful monuments. They're very, very valuable and much loved by the community, and they all have existing constituencies that share in the maintenance and enjoy these monuments. They're very much living monuments, not just to our local community, but to to the groups who are involved in the, as I said, in the ongoing maintenance. This is an image of the Kossuth monument in 1935, and this is an annual event that they had. They began after the installation of the monument and continues to this day. The proposal itself is designed by Tamás Nagy. He's an architect who lives, works, and practices in Budapest. So we've been coordinating this design through Parks Department. We've had multiple players in the design. The proposal involves the installation of a granite bench with text, and also a circular plaque which has a design which reflects the night sky on as it was on October the 23rd in 1956 in Budapest, on the night of the revolution. Now, I should say, in terms of the usage of this area, as I said, it is loved and well used by the community. These landscape islands really almost function as independent parks, unto themselves. People coming out of the buildings and coming down to the park. I think a lot of people at times don't even realize that this is part of Riverside Park, because it's really almost like an independent park. People love to come to this area and they love to sit in this area. And currently the seating is provided by the steps of the monument, which is, a nice seating location. But part of this design provides seating for contemplation and also for people who just come to the area to sort of to enjoy the park. This shows you in plan view the proposed layout. The existing plaza, as I said, is 5-foot landscape, 5-foot bluestone pavement around the existing monument. We propose to move it to add an additional 10 feet to the south, which will then accommodate the granite bench and the granite plaque. This shows you on the right-hand side the southernmost edge of the existing plaza area, and the 10-foot extension that we propose to install. As part of the project, we're proposing to resurface the existing stone screenings path, which will basically just be top dressing the existing path for the large part, but we'll then reconfigure the path as it meets the plaza area. Very, very similar to the existing layout, but pushed 10 feet further south. I showed you the section running north-south through the existing monument, and to the right, the proposed bench, which is 3 feet high, and the plaque itself is elevated 6 inches. The dimensions are on this image here. The finishes for the stone are the actual seat of the bench area is thermal. The face of the bench and the exposed face of the plaque itself are bush hammered, so they're a slightly rougher finish. And the top surface of the plaque is also thermal. And the areas where there are text, which is in 3 different locations, there's commemorative text on the left of the seat. There's text explaining the constellation imagery on the plaque, and there's a larger area of text. And all of those are in honed finish, not highly polished, but slightly polished so that the text reads better. This shows you the inspiration for the design, star constellation in Budapest on the night of the uprising of the revolution. And these are our materials. The left-hand image shows the layout, and the right shows how we're proposing to reflect this. There are 3 different sizes of stainless steel insets, which are embedded 3 inches into the thermal face of the granite plaque, which I think I forgot to say that is Barrow grey granite. And they're then connected by these raised lines, which are in a honed finish, so they read a slightly darker color. The text will be infilled with dark gray lithochrome shadow, and this shows you the details of the proposed granite, which is Barre granite. On the left is our typical natural cleft bluestone installation. We're actually proposing to remove all of the existing bluestone. It's in sort of fairly decent condition in places, but because of the adjacent tree roots, there's a little bit of heaving and settlement. So we're proposing to replace all of it. It's actually more of a random cut than the image that we have here, but it's typical of all of the Moses installation in Riverside Park. This shows you the details of the text. On the top left, the corner of the bench, the text on the constellation markers in the center, and the incised text, which, the bottom is actually the incised text on the plaque. Oh, sorry, I've got these the wrong way around. I can't read from here. But the constellation is the middle text. The bottom text is actually the text that's on the seat wall. And we're proposing to remove not all of the existing plantings, but the larger evergreens that are sort of obscuring the monument a little bit. So we're adding to the color, we're lowering the plantings, we're adding to the plant material diversity, and we're basically going for all seasonal interest in our plantings.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions? Yes, Diana?
Yeah, I have a couple. One is about how many actual, I think you're extending 10 feet in one direction. How big is the actual amount of park that you're changing from greenscape to hardscape?
It's 10 feet.
10 feet.
So we're losing, 10 feet by 33, the total width of the... Actually, I'm sorry, it's actually 20. The total width now is 33 in terms of the length, and the existing width, I believe, is 22.
Well, yeah, but that's already there, you're saying.
Yes.
I'm talking about what you're actually, what are you losing in terms of...
So we're losing 10 by 22.
Okay. Yeah. And the other question I had was, I like the design, but I was thinking that, I wondered if you had considered it all, like extending the bench in terms of either having the lettering below or above so that you could have a larger seating bench, because you do have a nice little seating bench, but it's not as long as it might be if the lettering were positioned differently.
We did consider, I think you went on a conceptual basis about more than a year and had some the design commission, and we got some feedback. Clearly, this inscription is the commemorative component, so it needs to be readable and visible. Also, in terms of the height of the wall, if we look to the north, to Tilden, and to the south to Tilden, excuse me, and this is actually a little lower than that wall. So the sight lines are good too, so after opening up the vista from the monument to the park. But yeah, it's a constrained space, and we did consider I see that point, I don't know if we have any wiggle room.
We did go to a public design commission for conceptual approval because we wanted to make sure that this was a design that they were.
And I should add that the funds for this are being raised by the committee, as well as they're also endowing site care.
Great. Michael, I do like the design, but I was just thinking about this issue, so it was considered.
Right, okay, Michael, Wilfred.
A different color than the existing granite.
It is. The new granite is gray, Barrow gray granite. The existing granite is pink. It's Milford pink granite. That was another question. Our first proposal was looking at the site that we should look at the existing materials and that we should definitely consider using the existing granite. However, when we went to Public Design Commission for conceptual approval with this recommendation, they recommended that we not go with Milford pink because they felt that it wasn't a material that would take the text etching very well. So really at that point, I think we stepped back and we thought, well, are we going to consider another pink granite? And Milford pink has like a black fleck in it. It has a pretty distinctive coloration. And anything else we felt would look a little bit different. So at that point, I think we opted for the other strategy, which was then to say, well, this is a new installation. If it's not going to be the same stone, then let's select, as selected by the designers, let's select an alternative stone that will be appropriate but different.
Yes, Fred?
Well, that was my question too, and so thank you for a full answer. I don't, well, we're in questions.
All right. Other questions?
Just a practical one. I hope this, first of all, is very nicely done. Sort of reminds me a little bit of the edges on the FDR Memorial on Roosevelt Island in a very small scale. But I hope there are no skateboarders in this area, because we encountered that, as you know, the Parks Department, Jonathan, you know. A lot of skateboarders go around the flat edges and they like to skateboard, but this is a memorable memorial, so I hope it doesn't get abused on the sharp corners and the edges.
We've taken that into consideration. I mean, that was something that came up fairly early. It's not a very large plaza, and because of the nature of the natural cleft bluestone, it's fairly irregular. But we work for Parks Department. You know, we see this all the time. We know that it's a big issue. So we've actually, the bench is actually designed to where it has like a little notch every 2 feet, which will then sort of, that seemed to be the least obtrusive installation, and it kind of defines your seating area, like you're sitting down in the subway, okay, this is your 2 feet. But it's really sort of about preventing skateboarding. And also the bush hammered finish as well is not so sort of attractive to skateboarders. So we've definitely considered that.
And the running space too, because you have the element, the raised element right in the middle, so we've been analyzing this greatly. Fulton Square is terrible, actually, but I just brought a skateboard expert into Frederick Douglass Circle, and the running feet is a lot to do with it too. You can get a jump and kind of get some speed up, and so it's a very important issue you raise, and we always hold our breath a little bit.
And so is Kim Lau Square. Kim Lau Square is having been demolished partially because of that.
Right.
Okay. Are there any other questions? All right. Close the hearing. So just comments? Yes, Dan?
Actually, I would date myself by saying that, you know, the recollection of hearing about the revolution at that point, and at that time, I was old enough to think that we should be doing something about it. It's stayed with me forever. But anyway, I think that is an appropriate setting, given that the original revolution was being celebrated there. And I like the fact that the design, which I do think is very nice, has incorporated both the seating area and then the constellation, both of which are things that people can relate to and get some value out of, other than just a fixture in the park. It's something that has a use as well. So I think both of those work very nicely, and I think it is appropriate, fits well, and will serve a dual purpose that it can be utilized by everyone, as well as someone appreciating the historic context.
Yes, Fred.
I agree, and don't need to add too much to that. I was concerned that the whitish marble, granite might be out of place, but I think your explanation makes sense to me. I think one of the things we have to define here is that this is an appropriate use of 220 feet of Frederick Olmsted's valuable turf, or in this case, somewhat past their prime landscaping, and I would suggest that it is.
It's a big park. Any other comments?
I would agree. It's very modest and it's a very well-used space. I'm surprised how modest it is, given the scale of the revolution.
See it as one place, as an ensemble.
Okay, Wellington? Yes, thank you.
Be delighted to. In the matter of applications 18-2892 Riverside Park at 113th Street, Riverside Park's scenic landmark, the application is to reconstruct the plaza and install a granite monument. I recommend a positive report finding that the presence of monument within the landscaping near the eastern edge of the park will be consistent with the historic placement of monuments throughout the park, that the proposed installation will be grouped within the existing costume monument, creating an ensemble, and placed at a sizable distance from the next nearest monument, the Tilden Monument, helping the work to be well integrated with the site. without overpowering the section of the park, that a small reduction in the planted area adjoining the plaza and separated from the more continuous expanses of landscaping by roadway will not significantly reduce the overall amount of landscaping within this area of the park. Eliminate a buffer between the plaza and surrounding roads, or detract from any significant landscape features or vistas. That the plaza will only be modestly enlarged, utilizing bluestone paving, matching the existing paving, and its change in footprint from a square to a rectangle will remain compatible with the existing monument and plaza composition, which features rectilinear supporting elements. That the proposed monument and bench will be simply designed low in height and set at a short distance from the historic castle monument, and will feature granite, which will match the existing monument base in terms of material and harmonize with it in terms of finish, thereby helping the new installation to remain a subordinate, harmonious presence in relation to the historic monument. That the slight modifications to the footprints of the existing pedestrian pathways which were added in the 21st century will maintain curvilinear form, widths, and intersection which are consistent with historic pathways throughout the park, and that the work will support the historic and architectural heritage of the Riverside Park and Riverside Drive, his scenic landmark, without diminishing its significant naturalistic character.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Application is approved.
Okay, Commissioners, there's one more item, and it's an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 173027. This is 890 Park Avenue, located within the Upper East Side Historic District. This is a Queen Anne-style row house designed by James E. Ware and built in 1884-85. The application was to alter the front and side facades, construct rooftop and rear yard additions, alter the areaway, and excavate the cellar. This was last presented to the Commission February 2nd, 2016.
Hungarian, escaped in 1956.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Emma Waterloo, Preservation Staff. The item before you is for 890 Park Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. The building is located on the west side of the avenue between East 78th and East 79th Streets. For your reference, the existing conditions is shown over here on the left. This proposal was last presented to the Commission at the public hearing on February 2nd, 2016. The proposal shown to the Commission is at the center of the slide. At that hearing, the Commissioners expressed several concerns regarding this proposal, including the level of visibility and massing of the addition and its overhang of the roof ridge, the design of the addition and its relationship to the design of the historic house, and the relationship between the parlor floor entrance door and transom in the style of the house. So the applicant has made several changes to the design in response to the Commissioners' concerns, and their new proposal is shown here at the far right. Changes include setting the second floor of the addition back 13 feet 8.5 inches from the historic roof bridge, installing a glass railing set back 2.5 feet from the historic roof bridge, simplifying the design of the addition and modifying the design of the parlor floor entrance door and transom to more closely recall the historic door configuration. Also, I wanted to alert you that slide 8 has some very slight inaccuracies, so included in your handout should be a second sheet of photographs which are taken and keyed to the plan that was shown on slide 8. The applicant is further here to answer any of your questions.
All right, are there any questions? Do we want them to go through the presentation?
I mean, that sort of summarized it. I can expand upon the changes that were made in response to the Commission.
We're good?
I think this image sort of demonstrates it fairly well, which is this is the current gable, the eave of the roof.
Well, we haven't opened, yeah, I'm sorry, we haven't opened the hearing, so you can't speak.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The question was whether, do we have any
I'd like to see it.
Okay, all right, we'll be open, so if you could go through your presentation very quickly. No, that's fine.
So I'm not going to go back and do the history of the building, that would be a repeat of the last presentation, but, so primarily I want to discuss the response to the Commission's concerns about visibility and appropriateness. So we have actually, originally the penthouse is this, oh, there we go. This dotted outline is the previous presentation. So at that time, there was a volume on the front engaging Park Avenue, and there was a terrace, private terrace on the back. And in fact, we flipped that, actually at a suggestion, I believe, of one of the commissioners, and moved the penthouse back a total of 15 feet from its original location and 13.8 from what is now the ridge line of the gabled roof from the front. So that's another 9 feet from the street. So actually, from the property line, the total setback is 24 feet. We've also lowered it as much as we could. We've also done this step detail in the facade to also reduce the sight line from Park Avenue. It is still minimally visible. So that is the previous section of the overall so let me go back. So there's a comparison of the, as Emma said, the original, the first proposed design, and the current design with the setback. Those windows that you see along are required. These windows here, this is our light and air requirement for this bedroom. So we need to have some light and air. We can't do it from the back because we're within 3 feet of the property line. All of the other floors were grandfathered in as legal habitable spaces, but we need some window along Park Avenue. So we minimize that, and that is at the ridge line. We've got the terrace, we've set this rail back, and then the actual addition is back another 13 feet.
Can you flip back to the rendering and just show where those are?
Where those are in
in what you can see. Thank you.
Yes, okay, so...
That strip. Yeah, that's...
Oh, sorry.
Very good.
This is the window. That's the 2-foot window. The railing is above it, and then you can just barely see the penthouse above that. That's that third line. So there's actually 3 lines. There's the window line, which is out at the gable, setback, handrail, and then further, again, setback is the penthouse. That's from view from 79th Street and Park, and this is down at 78th Street. Again, original, first proposal, and current proposal. This is a same visibility diagram. This is where the arrow is taken. The photo on the far right is much further back, but that's the visibility as you walk down between 78th and 79th. None of it is visible on the west side of Park Avenue. It's only on the east. That's the previous section, elevations. Obviously, it still looks weird. So there's the plan. The terrace is now in the front. There's a small skylight, which is sloped, also not visible, but that allows us to get the headroom. So you get the stair up to that level. That's the previous design. So you can see we've set that line now is way back. It's back here. And that's where it was out here. This is the stoop. So the modifications we made to the stoop in response to the commission was to do a wood door with divided lights, a little more in keeping with the facade and the window style itself. So some enlarged sections. That is the mock-up that was just finished. And you kind of barely see it there, but that is the mock-up is there too as well. I think the darker, the rendering with the reflective is more visible. And then this is just, the appendix is just the presentation from the first round.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? No questions, we can close the hearing. All right, comments? I think it's much better than it was before. Yes, Michael.
I think it's way, way better. But, I think it could be even better if they push that first pane of glass back a foot or so, just so it's off the ridge. Just the,
You mean setback
Yeah.
for,
either the setback of glass or setback of the glass and the fascia. There you go. That window right there. If we're to move off the ridge, I think it would just allow the house to kind of look more.
You mean like just 12 inches back or something like that?
Yeah, I don't think it would be a big, it wouldn't affect your light there, it wouldn't affect anything. It would just kind of let the house read more as.
and we can ask them to work with staff on that.
Staff thing.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Good.
Good. In the matter of 890 Park Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District, the application is to alter the front and side facades, construct rooftop and rear yard additions, alter the areaway, and excavate the cellar. I recommend approval, noting that the building is situated between two significantly larger apartment buildings and primarily seen from public thoroughfares within the context of secondary facades of other large buildings. Therefore, the presence of a moderately visible addition seen against the backdrop of taller buildings and sky will not detract from a prominent streetscape silhouette. That the simple massing of the rear of the house is not a significant characteristic of this building or part of an extant row or a grouping of buildings of similar size. Therefore, constructing an addition which aligns with the rear facade and existing extension will not obscure a significant architectural feature, disunify a row, or create an awkward relationship with neighboring properties. That the alteration to the main building entrance will not cause the removal of any significant historic fabric and will help return a sense of prominence to the entrance and the presence of a stoop. That the proposed entrance infill will be well sealed, well scaled to the masonry opening, match the historic fill in terms of materials, and recall the character of the original entrance infill in terms of its proportions, configuration, details, and percentage of glazing. That the brownstone materials and profiles of the entrance steps and areaway wall will recall characteristics of historic stoops and areaway walls typically found at buildings of this type, scale, and age. That the areaway wall and railings will be typical in terms of placement and wall scale to the building. That the proposed light fixtures will be typical in terms of placement, simple in design, well scaled to the facade. That the HVAC equipment will be in keeping with utilitarian rooftop mechanical equipment found at buildings of this type, style, and age. That the modifications of existing masonry and creation of new masonry openings and replacement of windows at the simply designed secondary facades will not affect any significant architectural features or eliminate a special window. That although the masonry openings at the lot line facade will not maintain a regular pattern, they will not change the character of the facade from the secondary facade with a high solid to void ratio, and these will only be visible from public thoroughfares at oblique angles. That the new openings at the rear facade and extension will maintain horizontal bands of masonry and metal reflecting the floor levels and will not remove the full width of the facades, thereby helping to maintain openings which relate to the building's proportions and size. That the proposed alterations to the rear facade and extension will not be visible from a public thoroughfare and will face service areas and courtyards of large apartment buildings and not diminish a central green space. and that the excavation and underpinning will be done in compliance with Department of Buildings regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer or registered architect to protect the building's facades and the adjacent buildings. Further, that the applicant will work with the staff to set back the window at the ridge of the mansard roof approximately 12 inches.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? This application's approved. Thank you. Second.
Have